The ocean stretches endlessly before us, its surface rippling with secrets that have remained hidden for millennia. Beneath those dark waters, where sunlight has never touched the seafloor, lies perhaps the greatest mystery our world has ever known. What if I told you that the legendary city of Atlantis, dismissed by scholars as mere fantasy, not only existed, but continues to thrive in the crushing depths of our planet's most unexplored frontier? Welcome to History for Sleep, where we dive deeper than conventional wisdom dares to venture. I'm your guide through the shadows of the past, where truth and legend dance together in the twilight between what we know and what we fear to discover. Tonight, we embark on a journey that will challenge everything you've been taught about ancient civilizations, lost worlds, and the very nature of human history itself. Close your eyes and let your imagination descend with me into the abyss, where pressure could crush a human body in an instant, where strange creatures glow with their own ethereal light, and where, according to mounting evidence, an advanced civilization may have been watching us from below for over 11,000 years. The story begins not in the depths of the Atlantic, but in the mind of a brilliant Greek philosopher named Plato, writing in Athens around 360 BCE. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato described a magnificent island nation that existed 9,000 years before his time. This wasn't just any civilization, but a maritime empire of unprecedented sophistication, possessing technologies that seemed almost magical to the ancient world. According to Plato's account, Atlantis was a circular island roughly the size of Libya and Asia combined, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. The city itself was an engineering marvel, constructed in concentric rings of land and water, connected by bridges and tunnels that allowed ships to navigate from the outer ocean to the very heart of the metropolis. But here's where the story takes a turn that has puzzled historians for centuries. Plato described Atlantean technology with a precision that feels almost prophetic. They possessed flying vehicles, underwater vessels, and energy sources that could power their entire civilization. Their architecture defied the limitations of Bronze Age construction, with massive temples and palaces built from materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The Atlanteans themselves were described as a hybrid race, part human, part divine, descended from the sea god Poseidon. They were said to possess lifespans far exceeding those of ordinary mortals, along with psychic abilities that allowed them to communicate across vast distances and manipulate the very elements themselves. For over 2 millennia, scholars have debated whether Plato intended Atlantis as literal history or philosophical allegory. The conventional wisdom insists it was merely a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and moral decay. After all, according to Plato, the Atlanteans eventually became corrupt and aggressive, prompting the gods to sink their island beneath the waves in a single day and night of destruction. But what if the academics got it wrong? What if they've been so focused on dismissing Atlantis as fiction that they've ignored the mounting evidence suggesting Plato was preserving an actual historical memory? Consider this disturbing possibility. Throughout history, whenever discoveries have threatened to rewrite our understanding of human civilization, they've had a curious tendency to disappear. Archaeological sites mysteriously lose their funding. Researchers find their careers derailed. Evidence vanishes into private collections or government archives where it's classified beyond public reach. This pattern of suppression becomes even more troubling when we examine the timeline of oceanic exploration. We've mapped less than 5% of our planet's sea floor. The deep ocean remains more alien to us than the surface of Mars. In this vast, unexplored wilderness, entire civilizations could exist without our knowledge. Recent advances in deep-sea technology have begun to reveal structures on the ocean floor that defy conventional explanation. Sonar surveys have detected geometric formations too regular to be natural arranged in patterns that suggest intelligent design. Underwater archaeological sites off the coast of Japan, India, and the Caribbean have yielded artifacts that predate known human civilizations by thousands of years. But perhaps most intriguing are the eyewitness accounts from deep-sea researchers and military personnel who've reported encounters with unidentified submerged objects displaying technologies far beyond our current capabilities. These craft move through water with impossible speed and maneuverability, suggesting propulsion systems based on principles we don't yet understand. The official response to such reports follows a predictable pattern: denial, ridicule, and classification. Yet the accounts persist, growing more detailed and more disturbing with each passing year. Submarine crews describe massive structures rising from oceanic trenches, glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulse in complex rhythms. Deep-sea mining operations encounter interference from sources that shouldn't exist at such depths. What emerges from these scattered reports is the outline of a civilization that has mastered technologies we're only beginning to imagine. Bioluminescent architecture that provides light without generating heat. Pressure-resistant materials that remain flexible at crushing depths. Energy systems that tap directly into geothermal and tidal forces. This isn't the primitive society that sank beneath the waves in Plato's account. This is a civilization that has had 11,000 years to adapt, evolve, and perfect their underwater existence. They've had millennia to develop technologies specifically designed for deep ocean survival, while we surface dwellers have remained ignorant of their presence. The implications are staggering. If Atlantis survived their supposed destruction and continued to thrive beneath the waves, they would possess a technological advantage over surface civilization that borders on the incomprehensible. They would have witnessed the rise and fall of every human empire, observed our wars, our achievements, our failures, all while remaining hidden in the depths. But why remain hidden? The answer may lie in the very catastrophe that supposedly destroyed them. Perhaps the sinking of Atlantis wasn't divine punishment, but a strategic retreat. Faced with some existential threat, possibly from other surface civilizations or cosmic forces beyond their control, the Atlanteans may have deliberately submerged their cities to ensure their survival. This theory gains credibility when we consider the geological evidence for massive climatic upheavals around 11,000 years ago. The end of the last ice age brought catastrophic flooding, volcanic eruptions, and electromagnetic disturbances that could have threatened any advanced civilization. A society with sufficient technology might have chosen to retreat beneath the waves rather than face extinction on the surface. If this hypothesis is correct, then the Atlanteans have spent the last 11 millennia developing their underwater civilization while carefully monitoring surface developments. They would have observed the rise of Egypt, Greece, Rome, and every subsequent empire, learning from our mistakes while perfecting their own society in isolation. The question that haunts researchers who dare to pursue this line of inquiry is whether the Atlanteans remain purely observers, or whether they've chosen to intervene in human affairs. Ancient texts from cultures around the world describe encounters with beings who emerged from the sea, bearing gifts of knowledge and technology. These so-called sea peoples or water gods appear in the mythologies of civilizations that had no contact with each other. Yet their descriptions share remarkable similarities. Could these have been Atlantean emissaries, carefully managing the development of surface civilizations? The sudden appearance of advanced mathematical concepts, astronomical knowledge, and architectural techniques in various ancient cultures might not represent independent discoveries, but rather controlled transfers of information from a hidden source. This possibility becomes even more unsettling when we examine modern technological developments. Many of our most significant advances in underwater exploration, materials science, and energy systems have come from researchers who report inspiration from dreams or sudden insights they can't fully explain. While science typically attributes such breakthroughs to subconscious processing, What if these insights represent a more direct form of communication? The deep ocean provides the perfect environment for a civilization that wishes to remain hidden while maintaining surveillance capabilities. Sound travels differently underwater, allowing for communication systems that could span entire ocean basins without surface detection. The extreme pressures and corrosive environment of the deep sea naturally protect against intrusion by surface dwellers, while the vast distances involved make systematic exploration nearly impossible with current technology. Furthermore, the ocean's thermal layers create natural barriers that could conceal entire cities from sonar detection. Advanced materials could blend seamlessly with the seafloor geology, making even massive structures invisible to our crude scanning methods. A civilization with 11,000 years of development would have perfected camouflage technologies that make their installations undetectable to surface instruments. But perhaps most importantly, the ocean provides unlimited resources for a technologically advanced society. Geothermal vents supply endless energy. Mineral deposits on the seafloor contain every element needed for advanced manufacturing. The biomass of deep-sea ecosystems could support populations far larger than anything possible on land, especially with biotechnology sophisticated enough to optimize marine food chains. An underwater civilization would also possess inherent advantages in space exploration. The deep ocean provides a natural training ground for the vacuum of space, with similar challenges involving pressure differentials, radiation exposure, and closed-system life support. Atlantean technology developed for deep-sea exploration could easily be adapted for interplanetary travel, giving them capabilities that might extend far beyond our own planet. This raises the disturbing possibility that what we interpret as extraterrestrial encounters might actually represent contact with our own planet's hidden civilization. The classic descriptions of UFOs emerging from or disappearing into bodies of water would make perfect sense if these craft originated from underwater bases rather than distant star systems. The technology required for such capabilities, while seeming impossible to us, represents exactly what we might expect from a civilization that has had 11,000 years to develop without the constraints and conflicts that have limited surface progress. While we've spent millennia fighting wars and rebuilding after disasters, the Atlanteans would have enjoyed uninterrupted technological advancement in a stable environment. Consider the mathematical precision this would require. Every aspect of their society would need to function in perfect harmony with oceanic systems they've had millennia to study and understand. Their architecture would be designed to work with tidal forces rather than against them. Their energy systems would tap into the planet's own geological processes. Their transportation networks would utilize deep ocean currents that remain invisible to surface observation. The result would be a civilization so perfectly integrated with its environment that it becomes virtually undetectable to outsiders. We surface dwellers, with our crude instruments and limited understanding of oceanic systems, would be like primitive tribes trying to detect a modern city using smoke signals and drums. Yet, if this hidden civilization exists, why haven't they revealed themselves? The answer may lie in a form of quarantine protocol designed to protect both civilizations. Contact between societies with such vastly different technological capabilities has historically resulted in the destruction or assimilation of the less advanced culture. The Atlanteans, having observed human history for 11,000 years, would understand this pattern better than anyone. They may have established strict non-interference policies designed to allow surface civilization to develop naturally while preventing the catastrophic cultural shock that open contact would inevitably produce. This would explain the careful, limited nature of reported encounters, always ambiguous enough to be dismissed by skeptics while providing just enough evidence to intrigue serious researchers. But as we approach technological capabilities that might threaten oceanic environments or accidentally discover Atlantean installations, this policy of non-interference may be reaching its limits. The question that keeps researchers awake at night is whether we're approaching a threshold that will force the hidden civilization to reveal itself, either as protector or as enforcer of boundaries we never knew existed. As we drift deeper into this mystery, the evidence continues to accumulate in ways that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about human history and our place in the world. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but those secrets may be stirring in the depths, preparing to reshape everything we thought we knew about civilization itself. The most unsettling aspect of this hidden civilization theory isn't what we might discover about them, but what they might already know about us. Every satellite we launch, every deep-sea research vessel we deploy, every underwater cable we lay across the ocean floor could be monitored by technologies so advanced that our activities appear as transparent as an open book. Imagine beings who have perfected the art of observation, who understand our languages, our politics, our technological limitations, better than we understand them ourselves. They would know the locations of every nuclear submarine, every underwater research facility, every attempt we make to explore their domain. To them, our most classified military operations might be as obvious as children playing in a sandbox. This surveillance advantage extends far beyond mere military intelligence. An advanced underwater civilization would have unprecedented access to global communications networks. The vast majority of international internet traffic travels through undersea cables that crisscross the ocean floor like a neural network connecting continents. For a civilization that has mastered deep ocean technology, tapping into these information streams would be elementary. They would understand our economic systems, our cultural evolution, our scientific progress in real time. They would know about every breakthrough before it becomes public knowledge, every political crisis as it develops, every environmental threat before we fully comprehend its implications. This level of awareness would give them predictive capabilities that seem almost supernatural to surface dwellers operating with incomplete information. But knowledge brings responsibility, and here we encounter one of the most chilling aspects of the Atlantis survival theory. If this civilization has been watching us for millennia, they've witnessed every human atrocity, every war crime, every act of environmental destruction. They've seen species driven to extinction, ecosystems collapsed, and entire cultures erased by human expansion and conflict. From their perspective, surface humanity might appear as a destructive force that threatens the stability of planetary systems they've spent 11,000 years learning to protect. Our industrial pollution doesn't stop at coastlines. It flows into their ocean home. Our nuclear weapons testing has contaminated marine environments. Our deep-sea mining operations encroach on territories we don't even know we're violating. This creates a moral paradox that could explain the apparent restraint shown by this hidden civilization. Do they have the right to intervene in surface affairs to protect the planet they share with us? Or would such intervention represent the same kind of imperial aggression that has characterized human expansion throughout history? The evidence suggests they've chosen a middle path, one that involves subtle influence rather than direct control. Throughout human history, critical technological breakthroughs have often emerged in multiple locations, ASD simultaneously if the knowledge was being distributed, rather than independently discovered. The development of agriculture, metallurgy, navigation, and even modern technologies like computing and spaceflight have followed patterns that suggest coordinated advancement rather than random innovation. Consider the curious timing of oceanic exploration advances. Just as human population growth and industrial development began threatening marine ecosystems on a global scale, we suddenly developed technologies that allowed us to study and understand oceanic systems with unprecedented detail. Satellite imaging, deep-sea submersibles, and marine biology all advanced rapidly during the same period when environmental awareness became a global concern. These developments might represent a form of guided evolution, where a hidden civilization provides just enough knowledge to help surface dwellers understand the consequences of their actions without revealing the source of that understanding. It's a delicate balance that allows for human development while preventing the complete destruction of planetary systems. But this balance may be approaching a critical threshold. Our technology has advanced to the point where we're beginning to explore the deepest ocean trenches, the exact locations where an advanced underwater civilization would logically establish their most secure installations. Deep-sea mining operations are penetrating previously untouched regions of the seafloor. Military submarine activities are becoming increasingly sophisticated and far-ranging. From the Atlantean perspective, we may be approaching their doorstep with the curiosity of children, but the destructive potential of a nuclear-armed species. This scenario creates pressures that could force them to abandon their policy of hidden observation in favor of more direct intervention. Recent developments in underwater archaeology have produced discoveries that official sources struggle to explain. Structures found at depths of several thousand feet show construction techniques and materials that predate known human civilizations by millennia. Yet these sites are dismissed as natural formations or explained through increasingly elaborate theories that strain credibility. The pattern of dismissal follows a predictable formula. Initial discoveries generate excitement among researchers. Preliminary studies reveal anomalous features that challenge conventional dating methods. Then funding disappears, access is restricted, and the sites fade from public attention. The few researchers who continue investigating often find their careers derailed by professional ostracism or mysterious personal difficulties. This systematic suppression suggests coordination at levels that extend far beyond academic politics. Government agencies, international organizations, and even private research institutions seem to follow unspoken protocols designed to prevent certain discoveries from reaching public awareness. The question is whether this suppression originates from surface authorities seeking to maintain social stability, or from deeper sources with their own reasons for maintaining secrecy. The psychological impact of discovering an advanced hidden civilization would indeed be catastrophic for surface society. Every assumption about human achievement, historical progress, and our place in the natural order would require fundamental revision. Religious systems based on human uniqueness would face existential challenges. Economic structures built on resource scarcity would become obsolete overnight. Political systems predicated on national sovereignty would lose meaning in the face of a global civilization that predates all surface governments by thousands of years. Yet the alternative, continued ignorance in the face of mounting evidence, may be equally dangerous. If Atlantis exists and continues to develop in isolation, the technological gap between surface and subsurface civilizations will only continue to widen. Eventually, contact becomes inevitable, whether through accidental discovery or through circumstances that force the hidden civilization to reveal itself. The most likely scenarios for forced contact involve environmental crises that threaten oceanic systems beyond the Atlanteans' ability to repair through subtle intervention. Climate change, ocean acidification, plastic pollution, and deep-sea mining all represent existential threats to marine ecosystems that an ocean-based civilization would be compelled to address directly. Alternatively, human space exploration might trigger contact protocols. If Atlantean technology has indeed advanced to interplanetary capabilities, they might reveal themselves to prevent surface civilizations from carrying destructive behaviors beyond Earth's boundaries. A species that has learned to live in harmony with planetary systems would have legitimate concerns about human expansion into space environments. The signs of approaching contact may already be manifesting in ways we're only beginning to recognize. Increasing numbers of credible witnesses report encounters with underwater phenomena that display impossible technological capabilities. Military personnel describe objects that move through water and air with equal ease, suggesting propulsion systems that operate on principles we haven't discovered. Deep-sea research expeditions encounter interference that can't be explained by natural phenomena or known human technology. Communication systems experience disruptions in specific oceanic regions that correlate with geological features suitable for concealing large installations. Marine life exhibits behavioral changes in areas where sonar surveys detect artificial structures. These incidents follow patterns consistent with a civilization that's testing our readiness for contact while maintaining operational security. They provide enough evidence to prepare serious researchers for eventual revelation while remaining ambiguous enough to avoid premature social disruption. The implications extend far beyond mere historical revision. If Atlantis survived and thrived beneath the waves, their solutions to problems that currently threaten surface civilization could provide blueprints for our own survival. Sustainable energy systems, ecological integration, population management, and conflict resolution technologies developed over 11,000 years of continuous advancement could transform human society within a single generation. But such transformation would come at the cost of human independence and the illusion of being the dominant species on our own planet. We would be forced to acknowledge that we are junior partners in a relationship we never knew existed, students rather than masters of terrestrial civilization. As the evidence continues to accumulate in underwater archaeological sites, military encounters, and technological anomalies that defy conventional explanation, the question is no longer whether contact will occur, but when and under what circumstances. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are stirring in the depths, and the age of hidden observation may be drawing to its inevitable close. The weight of this possibility presses down upon us like the crushing depths themselves. If Atlantis truly survived their ancient catastrophe and evolved into something beyond our comprehension, then we must confront the most disturbing question of all. What do they think of us? Picture this scenario through their eyes. For 11,000 years, they have watched surface humanity repeat the same destructive patterns that may have driven them beneath the waves in the first place. We clear-cut forests they spent centuries learning to preserve. We poison rivers that flow into their oceanic sanctuary. We wage wars over resources that exist in abundance on the seafloor they call home. From their perspective, we might appear as a species trapped in an endless cycle of self-destruction, too primitive to understand the consequences of our actions, yet too dangerous to ignore. They would have observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each one promising to be different, each one ultimately succumbing to the same fundamental flaws that plague human nature. The Atlanteans would have witnessed the construction of the pyramids, the glory of ancient Rome, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and 2 world wars that nearly tore our species apart. They would have seen us split the atom, walk on the moon, and develop global communication networks, all while simultaneously driving species to extinction and destabilizing the climate systems that sustain all life on Earth. This observation would create a profound philosophical dilemma for any advanced civilization. Do they have a moral obligation to intervene and guide us towards sustainability? Or would such intervention represent the same kind of cultural imperialism that has characterized human expansion throughout history? The answer they've chosen appears to be a careful balance between protection and non-interference. But that balance is showing signs of strain. Consider the increasing frequency of what researchers call impossible encounters in our oceans. Naval personnel report objects that move underwater at speeds that should create cavitation bubbles visible from space. Yet, these craft leave no trace on our most sensitive detection equipment. Deep-sea mining operations encounter resistance from sources that shouldn't exist at crushing depths where human technology fails within minutes. These incidents follow patterns that suggest a civilization testing the boundaries of their own secrecy protocols. They reveal just enough to warn us away from sensitive areas while maintaining plausible deniability about their existence. It's a delicate dance that requires understanding human psychology with frightening precision. But perhaps most unsettling are the reports from marine biologists who describe encounters with sea life exhibiting behaviors that seem almost coordinated. as if following instructions from an intelligence we can't detect. Whales changing migration patterns to avoid underwater construction sites that don't appear on any human maps. Deep-sea creatures displaying bioluminescent patterns that pulse in mathematical sequences, too complex to be natural communication. These observations point toward a civilization that has achieved something we're only beginning to understand: true ecological integration. While we build cities that fight against natural systems, the Atlanteans appear to have developed technology that works in harmony with oceanic ecosystems. Their presence enhances rather than disrupts the marine environment, suggesting biotechnology so advanced that the boundary between artificial and natural becomes meaningless. This level of integration would require understanding marine systems at depths we've barely begun to explore. The deepest ocean trenches contain ecosystems that operate on principles completely different from surface life, creatures that exist in permanent darkness, under pressures that would liquefy human tissue, deriving energy from chemical processes that we're only now discovering. A civilization that has mastered these environments would possess biotechnology that seems magical to surface dwellers. They could cultivate organisms specifically designed for construction, communication, or energy production. Their cities might be grown rather than built, using biological processes that create structures stronger than our finest materials, while remaining completely biodegradable when their usefulness ends. The implications for human society are staggering. Every assumption we've made about sustainable development, about the relationship between technology and nature, about the limits of biological systems, would require complete revision. We've spent centuries trying to minimize the environmental impact of human civilization, while they may have spent millennia learning to make their presence beneficial to the ecosystems they inhabit. But this technological superiority comes with responsibilities that we can barely comprehend. If the Atlanteans have indeed achieved harmony with planetary systems, they would view our industrial civilization as a cancer threatening the health of the entire biosphere. Our carbon emissions, plastic pollution, and nuclear waste don't respect the boundaries between surface and sea. What we consider acceptable environmental damage might represent existential threats to a civilization that depends on oceanic stability for survival. This creates pressures that could force them to abandon their policy of non-interference. Climate change is altering ocean chemistry and temperature patterns that took millennia to establish. Deep-sea mining operations are penetrating regions they may have spent thousands of years cultivating into perfect ecosystems. Our submarine activities are encroaching on territories they've claimed through right of continuous habitation, spanning hundreds of human generations. The question becomes, at what point does environmental protection justify revealing themselves to prevent further damage? The answer may depend on thresholds we're not even aware we're approaching. Certain regions of the ocean may represent irreplaceable resources for their civilization, areas where interference would be met with direct response, regardless of the consequences for surface society. Recent developments in underwater archaeology suggest we may already be testing these boundaries. Expeditions to explore the deepest ocean trenches report equipment failures that follow suspicious patterns. Submersibles experience power outages in specific locations. Communication systems suffer interference that can't be explained by natural phenomena. Research vessels encounter underwater currents that seem to guide them away from certain areas. These incidents could represent natural hazards of deep-sea exploration, or they could indicate a civilization politely but firmly discouraging further investigation. The distinction matters because it suggests we're approaching a threshold where accidental discovery becomes inevitable. The most likely scenario for first contact doesn't involve dramatic revelation or invasion fleets rising from the depths. Instead, it would probably begin with gradual disclosure designed to minimize cultural shock while preparing surface humanity for the reality of sharing our planet with a vastly superior civilization. This process might already be underway through carefully orchestrated leaks of information that seem to emerge simultaneously from multiple sources. Ancient texts describing advanced underwater civilizations are being reinterpreted by scholars who suddenly find funding for previously dismissed research projects. Archaeological discoveries that challenge conventional timelines receive unexpected media attention. Military personnel begin speaking openly about encounters they were previously ordered to keep classified. The pattern suggests coordination at levels that extend beyond any single government or institution. If the Atlanteans have indeed spent millennia studying human psychology, they would understand exactly how to introduce revolutionary concepts without triggering the kind of social panic that has historically accompanied paradigm shifts. They would know that humans adapt to new realities gradually, that ideas need time to percolate through academic communities before gaining mainstream acceptance. They would understand the importance of maintaining existing power structures during transition periods, allowing surface governments to save face while adapting to new circumstances. But this careful management of disclosure creates its own tensions. The longer the secret is maintained, the more devastating the eventual revelation becomes. Every year of continued deception adds to the psychological trauma that surface humanity will experience when the truth finally emerges. There comes a point where the cure becomes worse than the disease, where maintaining secrecy causes more harm than honest disclosure. We may be approaching that tipping point now, as human technology advances to levels where accidental discovery becomes increasingly likely. Our deep-sea exploration capabilities are improving exponentially. Satellite imaging can detect underwater structures with resolution that increases monthly. Artificial intelligence systems are beginning to identify patterns in oceanic data that human researchers miss entirely. The Atlanteans would be aware of these developments and their implications for maintaining secrecy. They face a choice between revealing themselves on their own terms or having their existence discovered through human technological advancement. History suggests that civilizations prefer to control the narrative of first contact rather than having it thrust upon them by circumstances beyond their influence. The signs of approaching revelation are becoming impossible to ignore for those willing to look beyond official explanations. The evidence accumulates like pressure building in the depths, creating forces that will eventually demand release. The only question is whether that release will be controlled and gradual, or sudden and catastrophic. As we float here in the darkness between knowledge and ignorance, between the world we thought we knew and the reality that may be stirring beneath the waves, we must prepare ourselves for the possibility that everything we believed about human civilization, about our place in the natural order, about our dominion over this planet, may be nothing more than the comfortable illusions of children playing in shallow water while giants move in the depths below. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are rising toward the surface, and the age of innocence may be drawing to its inevitable close. In the crushing darkness of the deep, ancient eyes may be watching, ancient minds may be deciding, and ancient powers may be preparing to reshape the world in ways we cannot yet imagine. The evidence becomes more disturbing when we examine the systematic way information about deep-sea anomalies disappears from public record. Research vessels return from expeditions to the deepest ocean trenches with data that contradicts everything we know about geological formations, only to have their findings classified or buried in archives that few will ever access. Oceanographers who report structures too geometric to be natural find their research grants mysteriously terminated. Deep-sea photographers capture images of what appear to be artificial lights glowing from abyssal depths, only to have their equipment confiscated by authorities who claim national security concerns. This pattern of suppression suggests something far more organized than academic politics or government secrecy. The coordination required to silence discoveries across multiple institutions, multiple countries, and multiple decades points toward an intelligence network with resources and reach that extends beyond any surface-based organization. The question that haunts serious researchers is whether this suppression originates from our own governments or from advisors whose existence we're not supposed to acknowledge. Consider the implications if contact protocols are already in place. If Atlantean representatives have been working behind the scenes with surface authorities for decades or even centuries, it would explain the systematic nature of information control. World leaders might be operating under agreements they can never publicly acknowledge, bound by treaties with a civilization whose very existence would shatter the foundations of human society. This hidden diplomacy would create a shadow government that transcends national boundaries and political systems. Democratic leaders and dictators alike would be subordinate to advisors whose authority derives not from electoral mandate or military power, but from technological superiority so absolute that resistance becomes meaningless. The illusion of human independence would be maintained through careful theatre, while actual policy decisions are made by entities whose agenda remains completely opaque to surface populations. The evidence for such arrangements appears in the curious consistency of certain policies across supposedly hostile nations. Environmental protection measures for oceanic regions often receive unanimous support from countries that disagree on virtually every other issue. Deep-sea mining operations face regulatory obstacles that seem to emerge simultaneously from multiple governments without apparent coordination. Military submarine activities are subject to restrictions that follow patterns suggesting knowledge of boundaries that don't appear on any human maps. These policies make perfect sense if world leaders are operating under guidance from a civilization that has legitimate claims to oceanic territories. The restrictions protect areas that may contain Atlantean installations, while the environmental measures preserve ecosystems that support underwater populations we're not supposed to know exist. The coordination happens not through human diplomatic channels, but through direct communication with advisors who understand the true strategic situation. But maintaining such a massive deception requires more than just government cooperation. It demands control over information systems at levels that extend deep into academic institutions, media organizations, and even individual research careers. Scientists who stumble upon inconvenient truths find themselves facing professional obstacles that seem orchestrated to redirect their attention towards safer areas of study. Journalists who investigate oceanic anomalies encounter source materials that vanish overnight, and expert witnesses who suddenly become unavailable for comment. This systematic manipulation of information creates a reality bubble that protects surface populations from knowledge they're supposedly not ready to handle. But it also creates tremendous psychological pressure on the individuals who maintain the deception. Government officials, military personnel, and researchers who know the truth but cannot speak it operate under stress levels that would be unbearable without some form of support system. The support might come from the Atlanteans themselves, through psychological conditioning techniques that help surface collaborators maintain their roles without suffering mental breakdown. Advanced understanding of human neurology could enable forms of therapy that make deception feel natural rather than burdensome. The collaborators might genuinely believe they're protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge, even while serving the interests of a hidden civilization whose true intentions remain mysterious. This raises the most unsettling question of all. What do the Atlanteans actually want from us? Their behavior suggests goals that extend far beyond simple territorial protection or environmental preservation. The careful management of human technological development, the subtle guidance of scientific discovery, the manipulation of global politics all point toward a long-term agenda that requires surface civilization to develop along specific trajectories. One possibility is that they're preparing us for eventual integration into a larger galactic community. If Atlantean technology has indeed advanced to interplanetary capabilities, they may serve as intermediaries between Earth and civilizations that span multiple star systems. From this perspective, surface humanity represents a developing species that requires careful cultivation before it can be safely introduced to cosmic society. The process would require gradual conditioning to accept the reality of non-human intelligence, followed by technological education that allows us to contribute to galactic civilization rather than becoming a burden upon it. The secrecy serves to prevent premature contactitized surface populations or that could trauma-trigger destructive responses that would make integration impossible, but there's a darker interpretation that explains the evidence equally well. The Atlanteans may view surface humanity as a contamination that threatens the planetary ecosystem they've spent millennia perfecting. Our industrial civilization represents a cancer that will eventually destroy the biosphere unless it's either cured or excised entirely. The careful monitoring of human development serves not to prepare us for advancement, but to determine the optimal timing for intervention. From this perspective, the environmental crises we currently face, climate change, ocean acidification, mass extinction, might not be accidental byproducts of human activity, but deliberately orchestrated tests designed to measure capacity our species for self-correction. If we fail these tests by continuing destructive behaviors despite clear warnings, it would justify more direct forms of intervention. The intervention might take forms that seem benevolent, while achieving objectives that serve Atlantean interests rather than human welfare. Technological solutions to environmental problems could be provided in ways that create dependence rather than independence. Medical advances could include subtle modifications that make surface populations more compatible with Atlantean biology. Educational programs could gradually shift human culture toward values that align with underwater civilization priorities. The process would be so gradual and apparently beneficial that surface populations would welcome it as salvation rather than recognizing it as assimilation. By the time the true nature of the transformation became apparent, it would be too late to reverse course. Humanity would have become something different, something that serves the needs of a civilization whose agenda was never fully disclosed. Yet there's a third possibility that's perhaps the most disturbing of all. The Atlanteans may be preparing to abandon Earth entirely. If their technology has advanced to the point where they can establish colonies on other worlds, they may be planning to leave surface humanity to face the consequences of environmental collapse alone. The careful monitoring of our development serves not to guide us towards sustainability, but to determine whether we're worth saving when they make their final departure. The signs would be subtle, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. Increased activity in deep ocean regions as they prepare installations for evacuation. Accelerated extraction of resources from underwater mining operations that seem to have no surface destination. Changes in marine ecosystem management that suggest preparation for abandonment rather than long-term stewardship. If this scenario is correct, then the environmental crises we face represent not just human failure, but cosmic abandonment. The species that could have guided us towards sustainability has chosen instead to preserve their own civilization by relocating to worlds that haven't been contaminated by primitive industrial activity. Surface humanity would be left to inherit a dying planet while our former guardians establish new homes among the stars. The evidence for all these scenarios exists simultaneously in the deep ocean archives that remain beyond our reach. Every dive to abyssal depths reveals structures that shouldn't exist, technologies that operate on principles we don't understand, and life forms that seem too organized to represent natural evolution. But the deeper we probe, the more obvious it becomes that we're not exploring empty wilderness. We're trespassing in territories that have been claimed, developed, and protected for thousands of years. The response to our intrusion has been measured and proportional, but it's becoming increasingly direct. Research vessels encounter interference that can no longer be dismissed as equipment failure. Underwater installations detect surveillance that forces them to relocate or modify their operations. Communication networks experience disruptions that follow patterns suggesting intelligent intervention rather than natural phenomena. These incidents represent warnings delivered with precision that demonstrates intimate knowledge of human psychology and technology. The message is clear. Certain boundaries exist that we're not supposed to cross. Certain knowledge exists that we're not supposed to possess. And certain regions of our own planet remain off limits to surface exploration. The question is, what happens when human curiosity and technological capability make it impossible to respect those boundaries any longer? The answer may already be manifesting in the increasing frequency of unexplained phenomena in our oceans. Military personnel report encounters with objects that display impossible performance characteristics. Commercial vessels experience navigation anomalies in specific regions that correlate with deep-sea geological features. Marine life exhibits behavioral changes that suggest response to stimuli that don't appear on our instruments. These events follow escalating patterns that suggest a civilization testing different levels of revelation while monitoring human response. Each incident provides slightly more evidence than the last, gradually accustoming surface populations to the idea that our oceans contain intelligences we've never acknowledged. The process creates cognitive dissonance that forces people to choose between accepting an impossible reality or retreating into denial that becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. The psychological pressure builds like water rising in a sealed chamber, creating stress that will eventually demand release. The Atlanteans understand this dynamic because they've been studying human behavior for millennia. They know exactly how much truth we can absorb without triggering social collapse, and they appear to be approaching that threshold with deliberate precision. But they also understand that revelation creates its own momentum. Once the process begins, it becomes impossible to control completely. Information spreads through channels that even advanced surveillance cannot fully monitor. Human curiosity, once awakened, cannot be easily redirected towards safer subjects. The decision to begin disclosure commits both civilizations to a path that leads inevitably toward full contact, regardless of the consequences for either society. We may already have crossed that threshold without realizing it. The evidence accumulates in ways that seem random, but follow patterns that suggest coordination at levels we don't comprehend. Ancient texts are being reinterpreted by scholars who suddenly find support for previously dismissed theories. Archaeological discoveries receive media attention that seems disproportionate to their apparent significance. Military personnel begin discussing encounters they were previously forbidden to acknowledge. The convergence of these developments creates a narrative that prepares surface humanity for revelations that would have been unthinkable just decades ago. We're being conditioned to accept the impossible through gradual exposure to ideas that reshape our understanding of reality itself. The process requires patience and precision that only a civilization with thousands of years of experience could successfully execute. But conditioning has its limits, and those limits are being approached with increasing frequency. The gap between official explanations and observable reality grows wider each year. The contradictions become more obvious to anyone willing to examine the evidence objectively. The pressure for honest disclosure builds like tectonic forces that will eventually demand release through channels that may be beyond anyone's ability to control. In the crushing depths where pressure could liquefy human consciousness in an instant, ancient minds may be reaching conclusions about surface humanity's readiness for truth. The calculations involve variables we cannot comprehend: technological compatibility, psychological resilience, cultural adaptability, and factors that extend beyond our current understanding of what contact between civilizations actually requires. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are stirring with purpose that suggests decision points approaching, like deep currents that reshape entire oceanic systems. The age of hidden observation may be ending not through human discovery, but through choices made by intelligences whose patience has been tested by our species' relentless expansion into territories we were never meant to explore. As we drift here in the boundary waters between knowledge and ignorance, between the comfortable illusions of surface civilization and the vast realities that pulse in the depths below, we must prepare ourselves for the possibility that contact has already begun. The signs manifest in ways that seem coincidental, but follow patterns that suggest intelligence operating at scales we're only beginning to comprehend. The transformation of human consciousness may already be underway, guided by minds that understand the delicate process of expanding awareness without triggering the kind of psychological collapse that has historically accompanied paradigm shifts of this magnitude. We're being prepared for revelations that will reshape not just our understanding of history, but our conception of what it means to be human on a planet that may never have been truly ours. The transformation may be occurring through mechanisms so subtle that we mistake them for natural human development. Consider the exponential advancement of underwater technologies in recent decades. Our ability to explore oceanic depths has improved at a rate that seems to outpace normal scientific progress, as if guided by insights that emerge from sources we cannot identify. Deep-sea submersibles suddenly develop pressure-resistant materials that shouldn't be possible with current metallurgy. Sonar systems begin detecting patterns in oceanic geology that reveal formations too regular to be natural. Underwater communication networks achieve ranges and clarity that our theoretical models suggest should be impossible in marine environments. Each breakthrough arrives with explanations that satisfy surface scientists while concealing the true inspiration behind these advances. The timing of these developments correlates suspiciously with increasing environmental pressures on oceanic ecosystems. Just as human industrial activity begins threatening marine environments on a global scale, we acquire technologies that allow us to monitor and understand these systems with unprecedented precision. The knowledge arrives exactly when we need it most, delivered through channels that seem coincidental, but follow patterns that suggest careful coordination. Marine biologists report sudden insights into deep-sea ecosystem dynamics that revolutionize their understanding of oceanic life cycles. Oceanographers develop new theories about thermal circulation that explain phenomena they've observed for decades without comprehending. Climate scientists gain access to data about oceanic carbon absorption that provides crucial missing pieces for understanding global warming patterns. These revelations transform our relationship with the oceans from one of ignored stewardship. The knowledge forces use and exploitation to recognize marine environments as complex interconnected systems that require protection rather than conquest. Environmental policies begin shifting toward oceanic conservation with urgency that seems to emerge spontaneously across multiple nations and institutions. But the guidance extends beyond environmental awareness into territories that challenge our fundamental assumptions about technological development. Renewable energy systems begin incorporating principles that seem inspired by natural processes we've barely begun to understand. Tidal generators achieve efficiency levels that theoretical models suggested were impossible. Geothermal extraction techniques tap into oceanic thermal vents with precision that requires intimate knowledge of deep-sea geological systems. The technologies arrive through research programs that receive funding from sources that remain deliberately obscure. Private foundations with unlimited resources support projects that mainstream institutions dismiss as impractical. Government agencies suddenly prioritize research areas that seemed irrelevant until breakthrough discoveries prove their importance. The pattern suggests coordination that extends across traditional boundaries between public and private, national and international, civilian and military research initiatives. Most disturbing is the psychological component of this technological guidance. Researchers report inspiration that arrives through dreams or sudden insights they cannot explain through normal cognitive processes. Engineers describe solutions to complex problems that emerge fully formed in their consciousness, as if downloaded from external sources. Scientists experience moments of clarity about natural phenomena that feel like memories rather than discoveries. These experiences share characteristics that suggest they're not random inspirations, but carefully orchestrated transfers of information. The recipients are always individuals whose backgrounds and psychological profiles make them ideal conduits for specific types of knowledge. The timing coincides with technological development cycles that require particular breakthroughs to maintain forward momentum. The information arrives in forms that can be integrated into existing scientific frameworks without triggering suspicion about its origins. The process creates a feedback loop where human scientific advancement accelerates in directions that serve purposes we're not consciously aware of pursuing. We develop technologies that make us more dependent on oceanic systems, while simultaneously making us more capable of monitoring and protecting those systems. Our industrial civilization gradually transforms from a threat to marine environments into a guardian of oceanic stability. But this transformation comes with costs that we're only beginning to recognize. Traditional human culture, based on terrestrial agriculture and land-based resources, becomes increasingly obsolete as we develop technologies that require oceanic integration. Coastal populations grow while inland communities decline. Economic systems shift toward marine-based industries while terrestrial extraction becomes economically unviable. The changes feel like natural adaptation to environmental pressures, but they follow trajectories that consistently move surface humanity toward greater dependence on oceanic systems. We're being guided away from technologies that damage marine environments and toward innovations that require harmony with underwater ecosystems. The process is so gradual and apparently beneficial that we welcome it as progress, rather than recognizing it as assimilation. Educational systems begin emphasizing marine science and oceanic studies with intensity that seems disproportionate to traditional career opportunities in these fields. Students develop fascinations with deep-sea exploration that feel like callings rather than academic interests. Research universities establish programs in underwater archaeology, marine biotechnology, and deep-sea engineering that receive funding that far exceeds their apparent practical applications. The graduates from these programs enter careers that didn't exist when they began their studies. Industries emerge that require their specialized knowledge just as they complete their training. Job markets develop that seem designed to absorb their particular skills exactly when they become available. The synchronization suggests planning that extends far beyond normal educational and economic cycles. Perhaps most significantly, human culture begins shifting toward values that align with oceanic consciousness. Environmental protection becomes not just policy, but spiritual imperative. Sustainability transforms from economic constraint to moral foundation. Cooperation replaces competition as the primary organizing principle for advanced technological development. These cultural changes manifest simultaneously across diverse societies that have no apparent connection to each other. Indigenous communities in different continents begin sharing similar insights about oceanic spiritual significance. Urban populations develop environmental awareness that seems to emerge spontaneously from sources they cannot identify. Religious traditions begin incorporating oceanic imagery and marine metaphors that feel ancient despite being recently adopted. The convergence suggests influence that operates at levels deeper than conscious awareness. Human collective consciousness appears to be receiving information that reshapes our fundamental relationship with planetary systems we've ignored throughout recorded history. The transformation affects not just how we think about oceans, but how we conceive our role as a species sharing a planet with intelligences we're only beginning to acknowledge. But acknowledgement brings responsibility that may exceed our capacity to fulfill. If we accept that advanced civilizations have been guiding our development from beneath the waves, we must confront questions about autonomy, consent, and the true nature of human independence. Are we partners in planetary stewardship, or subjects being prepared for roles we haven't chosen in dramas we don't understand? The evidence suggests both possibilities simultaneously. Our technological development serves human interests while advancing agendas that extend beyond surface civilization priorities. Environmental protection benefits terrestrial ecosystems while preserving oceanic territories that may contain installations we're not supposed to discover. Cultural evolution toward cooperation and sustainability enhances human survival while creating psychological compatibility with civilizations that have perfected these principles over millennia. The dual nature of this guidance creates cognitive dissonance that becomes increasingly difficult to resolve through conventional frameworks. We're simultaneously becoming more capable and more dependent, more aware and more controlled, more advanced and more subordinate to intelligences whose true intentions remain opaque despite their apparent benevolence. Military establishments worldwide begin reporting encounters with underwater phenomena that display technological capabilities far exceeding anything in human arsenals. Nuclear submarines detect objects that move through water at speeds that should create acoustic signatures visible from orbit. Yet these contacts vanish from sonar screens without leaving traces that conventional physics can explain. Naval personnel describe lights moving beneath their vessels in geometric patterns that suggest intelligence rather than natural phenomena. The official response follows predictable patterns of denial and classification, but the accumulating reports create pressure that threatens the traditional boundaries between acknowledged and unacknowledged reality. Too many credible witnesses describe similar phenomena for dismissal to remain viable. The encounters increase in frequency and complexity, as if designed to gradually accustom military personnel to the existence of capabilities they've never been trained to confront. Defense contractors begin developing underwater detection systems that incorporate principles they cannot fully explain to their own engineers. The technologies work with efficiency that exceeds theoretical predictions, as if designed according to specifications that account for variables not included in human physics models. Research and development programs receive unlimited funding for projects that seem tangentially related to conventional military objectives. The pattern suggests preparation for scenarios that official doctrine doesn't acknowledge as possible. Military planning begins incorporating contingencies for underwater threats that display characteristics no human adversary possesses. Training programs develop protocols for encounters with technologies that operate according to principles that contradict everything military personnel thought they knew about underwater warfare. Intelligence agencies establish monitoring programs for oceanic regions that seem strategically insignificant according to traditional geopolitical analysis. Satellite surveillance focuses on deep-sea areas that contain no known resources or military installations. Communication interception systems begin monitoring frequencies that carry signals originating from sources that shouldn't exist at abyssal depths. The data collected through these programs remains classified at levels that exceed normal national security requirements. Analysis is restricted to personnel who undergo psychological evaluations that seem designed to identify individuals capable of processing information that challenges fundamental assumptions about planetary reality. The cleared personnel operate under protocols that isolate them from mainstream military and intelligence communities. This compartmentalization creates a shadow establishment within existing institutions, staffed by individuals who understand threats and opportunities that their colleagues are not permitted to acknowledge. The shadow personnel make recommendations that influence policy without revealing the intelligence that supports their conclusions. Defense strategies shift to accommodate realities that cannot be publicly discussed or officially recognized. The most unsettling aspect of this development is its global consistency. Military establishments that regard each other as adversaries follow similar patterns in their response to underwater anomalies. Intelligence agencies that normally compete for advantage cooperate in maintaining secrecy about oceanic phenomena. Defense contractors from different nations develop complementary technologies that suggest coordination despite apparent commercial rivalry. The cooperation suggests threat assessments that transcend traditional national security concerns. If underwater civilizations pose challenges that affect all surface nations equally, then traditional geopolitical competition becomes irrelevant compared to species-level survival considerations. Military establishments that understand this dynamic would naturally gravitate toward cooperation, despite surface tensions that continue to dominate public political discourse. But cooperation requires communication about subjects that official policy insists don't exist. The communication happens through channels that operate parallel to acknowledged diplomatic and military relationships. Personnel who participate in these discussions cannot discuss them with colleagues who lack appropriate clearances. The compartmentalization creates parallel command structures that operate according to priorities that surface governments cannot publicly acknowledge or defend. The psychological pressure on individuals who maintain these dual realities becomes immense as the gap between public knowledge and classified truth continues to widen. Military personnel who encounter impossible technologies must continue performing duties that assume those technologies don't exist. Intelligence analysts who process evidence of advanced underwater civilizations must produce reports that omit their most significant findings. Defense planners who prepare for contingencies involving non-human intelligence must justify their preparations through explanations that conceal their true purpose. The stress manifests in career patterns that seem designed to rotate personnel through sensitive positions before psychological pressure becomes unbearable. Individuals who demonstrate exceptional stability under classification stress receive promotions that provide access to even more disturbing information. Those who show signs of psychological strain find themselves reassigned to positions where their knowledge becomes irrelevant to their daily responsibilities. The career management suggests institutional experience with classification stress that extends back decades or centuries. The military establishments of major powers appear to have developed protocols for managing personnel who possess knowledge that cannot be shared with the societies they serve. The protocols create career tracks that isolate cleared individuals while providing them with support systems that help them maintain functional relationships with uncleared populations. But isolation has its own costs, and those costs accumulate as the classified population grows to include personnel across multiple services, agencies, and allied nations. The cleared individuals begin forming communities that exist parallel to surface society, connected by shared knowledge that cannot be discussed with family members, friends, or colleagues who lack appropriate access. These communities develop their own cultural norms, communication patterns, and support systems that gradually diverge from mainstream society. The divergence creates a hidden caste system where cleared personnel understand realities that uncleared populations cannot comprehend. The cleared individuals make decisions that affect everyone while operating according to information that cannot be shared or debated through normal democratic processes. The system creates governance that is simultaneously more informed and less accountable than traditional political institutions. The consequences extend beyond military and intelligence communities into academic institutions, research organizations, and private corporations that possess relevant expertise or technologies. University researchers who stumble upon inconvenient truths find themselves recruited into classification programs that restrict their ability to publish or discuss their most significant discoveries. Corporate personnel who develop technologies with oceanic applications discover that their innovations are subject to oversight that extends far beyond normal regulatory requirements. The recruitment process appears designed to identify individuals who can contribute to classified programs while maintaining the psychological stability necessary for long-term participation. The selection criteria include not just technical expertise, but personality characteristics that suggest compatibility with compartmentalized existence. The programs absorb talent from surface society while contributing innovations that benefit surface populations without revealing their true origins or implications. The result is a parallel civilization that exists within surface society, but operates according to principles and priorities that surface populations cannot access or influence. This parallel civilization possesses knowledge and capabilities that exceed anything acknowledged in public discourse, while remaining subordinate to intelligences whose existence cannot be officially recognized or challenged. The relationship creates dependencies that surface society cannot understand or address through normal political processes. policy decisions that seem driven by environmental concerns or technological opportunities actually serve strategic objectives that relate to underwater civilizations whose interests may not align with human welfare. The disconnect between public justifications and hidden realities grows wider as the parallel civilization gains influence over surface institutions. Democratic accountability becomes impossible when elected officials cannot discuss the information that drives their most important decisions. Citizens cannot evaluate policies when the true costs and benefits remain classified beyond their access. The foundation of representative government erodes as governance becomes increasingly dependent on expertise that cannot be democratically validated or challenged. The erosion creates vulnerabilities that underwater civilizations could exploit to reshape surface society according to their own priorities. If human governments depend on classified information that originates from non-human sources, then policy decisions ultimately serve interests that human populations cannot evaluate or influence. The appearance of democracy masks a reality where crucial choices are made by entities whose agenda remains completely opaque to the societies they affect. This possibility transforms every aspect of environmental policy, technological development, and international relations into potential expressions of underwater influence rather than human self-determination. Surface civilization may already have lost the autonomy we believe we possess, while remaining ignorant of the extent to which our choices serve purposes we haven't consciously adopted. The ocean depths pulse with activities that reshape our world through mechanisms we cannot detect or resist. Ancient intelligences may be implementing plans that span centuries or millennia, using human institutions as instruments for objectives that extend far beyond our current understanding of planetary politics or species survival. In the crushing darkness where pressure dissolves human consciousness and time moves according to rhythms that predate our civilization by thousands of years, decisions may be approaching that will determine whether surface humanity continues to exist as an independent species or becomes something entirely different, transformed according to designs we were never consulted about and purposes we cannot comprehend. The evidence accumulates like sediment on the abyssal plain, layer upon layer of anomalies that build toward revelations that will reshape everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are stirring with purpose that suggests the age of human ignorance is approaching its predetermined end. The transformation accelerates beyond our ability to comprehend its full implications. Consider the curious phenomenon occurring in marine research laboratories worldwide. Scientists are developing intuitive understanding of deep-sea ecosystems that surpasses anything their training should have provided. Marine biologists find themselves designing experiments based on hunches that prove startlingly accurate. Oceanographers develop theories about abyssal currents that align perfectly with phenomena they've never directly observed. These insights arrive with a quality that researchers describe as remembering rather than discovering. The knowledge feels familiar, as if accessing information that was always present in their consciousness, but previously inaccessible. Graduate students report dreams where they observe deep-sea environments with clarity that exceeds anything possible through conventional research methods. The dreams provide scientific insights that prove accurate when tested in laboratory conditions. The pattern suggests human consciousness is being prepared for knowledge that originates from sources we're not supposed to recognize. Our minds are being gradually opened to information streams that flow from intelligences operating at depths where human awareness cannot naturally penetrate. The process feels organic, like natural intellectual development, but follows trajectories that consistently align with oceanic perspectives rather than terrestrial priorities. Educational curricula begin emphasizing marine sciences with intensity that seems disproportionate to career opportunities in these fields. Children develop fascinations with underwater exploration that feel like genetic memories rather than learned interests. Marine archaeology programs receive funding that exceeds their apparent practical applications by orders of magnitude. The investment suggests preparation for discoveries that haven't been officially acknowledged as possible. Most significantly, human emotional responses to oceanic imagery undergo subtle but measurable changes. Populations that have never lived near coastlines develop profound psychological connections to marine environments. Urban dwellers experience stress reduction when exposed to underwater photography or deep-sea documentaries. The responses suggest neurological conditioning that operates below conscious awareness, gradually reshaping human consciousness toward compatibility with aquatic rather than terrestrial environments. The conditioning accelerates through entertainment media that consistently portrays underwater civilizations as benevolent and advanced. Films and television programs begin featuring storylines where contact with oceanic intelligences brings technological solutions to environmental crises. The narratives always emphasize cooperation rather than conflict, portraying underwater beings as wise guardians rather than potential threats. The messaging shapes public expectations about what contact with hidden civilizations might involve. Children's literature increasingly features stories about underwater kingdoms where advanced beings protect marine ecosystems from surface contamination. Educational programs use animated characters that live in deep-sea environments to teach environmental responsibility and oceanic conservation. The cultural programming begins at ages when psychological foundations are most malleable, creating generational shifts in attitudes toward oceanic authority. Religious institutions begin incorporating oceanic symbolism and marine metaphors into traditional doctrines. Sermons reference the wisdom of the depths and the need for humanity to humble itself before forces that operate beyond surface understanding. Prayer books include invocations that ask for guidance from ancient intelligences that dwell beneath the waves. The modifications feel like natural theological evolution rather than coordinated doctrinal revision. The spiritual transformation creates psychological frameworks that make eventual contact with underwater civilizations seem like divine revelation rather than alien encounter. Human consciousness is being prepared to accept non-human intelligence as spiritually superior rather than threatening to human autonomy. The conditioning eliminates resistance that might otherwise complicate integration processes. But the most disturbing aspect of this psychological preparation is its global consistency across cultures that have no apparent connection to each other. Indigenous communities in different continents begin sharing similar visions of oceanic spirits that require human service to planetary healing. Urban populations develop meditation practices that involve visualizing descent into deep-sea environments where ancient wisdom can be accessed. The convergence suggests influence that operates through channels that transcend normal cultural transmission methods. The influence manifests in scientific research priorities that consistently favor projects related to oceanic exploration and marine biotechnology. Universities establish departments of deep-sea archaeology that receive funding from sources that prefer to remain anonymous. Research vessels are constructed with capabilities that far exceed the requirements of acknowledged scientific missions. The vessels incorporate technologies that seem designed for encounters with underwater installations rather than natural geological formations. Submarine construction programs begin developing capabilities that official military doctrine doesn't require. Nuclear submarines receive modifications that enhance their ability to operate considered at depths previously inaccessible to human technology. The modifications follow specifications that suggest knowledge of oceanic conditions that shouldn't be available through conventional research methods. Defense contractors develop underwater detection systems that incorporate principles they cannot fully explain to their own engineers. The technological development creates capabilities that serve purposes beyond acknowledged military or scientific objectives. Human civilization gradually acquires tools that would be necessary for meaningful interaction with advanced underwater societies, while remaining officially ignorant of why such tools might be needed. The preparation happens through seemingly unrelated research programs that converge toward objectives that no human authority has publicly articulated. Commercial shipping industries begin modifying their operations to avoid specific oceanic regions without official explanation for these route changes. Insurance companies adjust their policies to reflect underwater hazards that don't appear in any published navigation guides. The modifications follow patterns that suggest knowledge of territorial boundaries that exist below the surface, but cannot be officially acknowledged or challenged. Fishing fleets report encounters with phenomena that cause them to permanently abandon previously productive fishing grounds. The encounters involve underwater lights, sonar contacts that behave with apparent intelligence, and equipment failures that occur only in specific geographic coordinates. The reports create unofficial no-go zones that commercial operators respect, without understanding the forces that make these areas hazardous to surface activities. The maritime industry develops protocols for dealing with underwater anomalies that official regulations don't acknowledge as existing. Crew training includes procedures for encounters with unidentified submerged objects that display impossible performance characteristics. Communication systems incorporate frequencies that can allegedly penetrate water depths where normal radio signals cannot function. The protocols suggest preparation for contact scenarios that mainstream science insists are impossible. Most tellingly, maritime insurance policies begin including clauses that exclude coverage for losses attributed to non-human underwater intelligence or advanced subsurface civilizations. The exclusions appear in standard policy language as if they were routine commercial considerations rather than acknowledgements of realities that official doctrine denies. The legal framework quietly adapts to accommodate possibilities that public discourse refuses to consider. The transformation extends into economic systems that begin shifting toward oceanic resources and marine-based industries. Coastal real estate values increase at rates that exceed normal market dynamics, as if driven by knowledge that coastlines will become more strategically valuable in the near future. Investment flows consistently favor companies developing underwater technologies or marine biotechnology applications. The capital allocation follows patterns that suggest awareness of opportunities that haven't been publicly identified. Venture capital firms establish funds specifically dedicated to deep-sea exploration technologies. The funds receive backing from sources that prefer anonymity, while pursuing objectives that seem tangentially related to conventional business opportunities. Startup companies developing underwater habitation systems or deep-sea mining equipment receive funding that far exceeds their apparent commercial potential. The investment suggests preparation for economic activities that current market conditions don't support. International trade agreements begin including provisions for oceanic territorial disputes involving non-state actors whose legal status remains deliberately undefined. The language creates frameworks for resolving conflicts with entities that official diplomacy doesn't acknowledge as existing. Treaty negotiations include representatives whose expertise relates to underwater law and deep-sea territorial rights, despite the absence of recognized underwater nations requiring such representation. The legal infrastructure quietly develops mechanisms for addressing situations that mainstream international law insists cannot arise. Courts begin establishing precedents for cases involving underwater archaeological discoveries that reveal evidence of advanced civilizations. Property rights frameworks expand to accommodate territorial claims based on continuous oceanic habitation spanning periods that exceed recorded human history. Actions for deep law evolves to include environmental sea ecosystems that seem designed to prevent interference with activities that official science claims don't exist. Marine sanctuaries are established in regions that contain no known endangered species or unique natural features. The protected areas follow boundaries that correspond to underwater geological formations, suitable for concealing large installations rather than conventional conservation priorities. The legal evolution creates regulatory frameworks that protect underwater civilizations while maintaining official denial of their existence. Human activities are restricted in ways that serve non-human interests without acknowledging the true beneficiaries of these restrictions. The system provides legal cover for territorial arrangements that surface populations cannot challenge, because they're not officially permitted to know these arrangements exist. Banking systems begin developing financial instruments capable of handling transactions that involve non-human entities whose legal status remains classified. Currency exchange mechanisms incorporate provisions for dealing with precious metals or rare elements that originate from sources that don't appear in geological surveys. The financial infrastructure adapts to accommodate economic relationships that transcend normal international commerce while remaining invisible to regulatory oversight. The most disturbing development is the emergence of human intermediaries who facilitate communication between surface institutions and underwater entities that officially don't exist. These intermediaries operate through diplomatic channels that parallel but remain separate from acknowledged international relations. They possess security clearances that exceed normal government classifications while representing interests that no surface nation can publicly acknowledge or challenge. The intermediaries develop their own professional networks that span multiple countries and institutions. They attend conferences that don't appear on public calendars and participate in negotiations that result in agreements that surface populations never vote on or ratify. Their influence shapes policies that affect everyone while operating through mechanisms that democratic institutions cannot access or control. The parallel diplomatic system creates governance structures that transcend national sovereignty, while remaining accountable only to entities whose agenda remains completely opaque to surface populations. Democratic oversight becomes impossible when the most important negotiations happen through channels that elected officials cannot monitor or influence. The foundation of human self-determination erodes as crucial decisions are made by representatives who serve interests that human voters cannot evaluate or challenge. Perhaps most ominously, genetic research programs begin developing modifications that enhance human compatibility with high-pressure environments and underwater breathing systems. The research is justified through medical applications for treating pressure-related disorders, but the modifications would also enable humans to survive at oceanic depths previously considered lethal. The biotechnology creates capabilities that serve no acknowledged human need while preparing our species for environments we're supposedly not planning to inhabit. Gene therapy trials begin testing treatments that modify human hemoglobin to carry oxygen more efficiently in low-oxygen environments. The trials target conditions that affect relatively small populations, but the modifications would benefit anyone attempting to function in underwater habitats. Pharmaceutical companies develop drugs that enhance human adaptation to pressure changes and reduce decompression sickness with effectiveness that exceeds normal medical requirements. The biological modifications arrive through healthcare systems that present them as medical advances rather than species preparation. Human physiology is being gradually altered to become more compatible with underwater environments while maintaining the appearance of normal medical progress. The changes accumulate across generations, creating populations that possess capabilities their ancestors lacked, while remaining unaware of how these capabilities might eventually be utilized. Educational systems begin emphasizing skills that seem tangentially related to conventional career paths, but would be essential for underwater colonization. Students develop expertise in hydroponics, closed-system life support, and high-pressure engineering through programs that claim to address terrestrial environmental challenges. The training creates human resources that could support underwater habitation while serving surface objectives that provide plausible explanations for acquiring these specialized skills. The convergence of genetic modification specialized education, and technological development creates a human population that's being systematically prepared for life in environments that official planning doesn't acknowledge as relevant to our species' future. The preparation happens through channels that seem unrelated, but consistently move toward objectives that serve underwater civilization interests, rather than human priorities we've consciously chosen. Military recruitment begins prioritizing candidates with psychological profiles that suggest compatibility with underwater operations and extended isolation from surface environments. The selection criteria include traits that would be valuable for personnel sea installations assigned to deep or underwater diplomatic missions. Training programs develop scenarios that prepare soldiers for encounters with non-human intelligence and prolonged assignment to classified underwater facilities. The military preparation suggests operational requirements that extend far beyond acknowledged defense needs. Personnel are being trained for missions that involve cooperation with underwater entities and assignment to installations that officially don't exist. The training creates human resources capable of functioning in environments and situations that mainstream military doctrine insists are impossible. Intelligence agencies establish recruitment programs that target individuals with expertise in marine biology, underwater archaeology, and deep-sea engineering. The programs offer career opportunities that seem disproportionately rewarding compared to conventional positions in these fields. Selected candidates undergo psychological evaluations that seem designed to identify individuals capable of maintaining loyalty to classified programs that challenge fundamental assumptions about planetary reality. The recruitment creates a professional class whose expertise relates specifically to underwater civilizations and oceanic territorial management. These specialists operate through classified channels while influencing policies that affect surface populations who remain ignorant of the true nature of decisions being made on their behalf. The system concentrates expertise about underwater affairs in hands that serve interests beyond human democratic control. Corporate research and development programs begin pursuing technologies that solve problems surface civilization doesn't officially recognize as existing. Underwater construction techniques receive investment that exceeds their apparent commercial applications. Deep-sea habitation systems are developed through programs that claim to address terrestrial housing shortages. The research creates capabilities that would be essential for surface underwater integration, while maintaining explanations that conceal their true strategic purpose. The technological development happens through private sector initiatives that operate beyond democratic oversight or public accountability. Corporations develop capabilities that could fundamentally alter the relationship between surface and underwater civilizations, while answering only to shareholders and classified oversight bodies whose agenda surface populations cannot access or challenge. The cumulative effect of these developments is a comprehensive transformation of human civilization that serves objectives we haven't consciously chosen while following trajectories that consistently benefit underwater entities whose existence we're not officially permitted to acknowledge. Every aspect of our society, economy, military, education, and legal systems is being modified to accommodate realities that remain hidden from public awareness and democratic deliberation. We're being prepared for integration into a larger planetary civilization that includes intelligences we've never been allowed to meet or evaluate. The preparation happens through mechanisms that seem designed to minimize psychological trauma while maximizing compliance with arrangements that surface populations will never be asked to approve or reject. The ocean depths pulse with activities that reshape our species, according to plans that span timescales beyond human comprehension. Ancient intelligences implement transformations that will determine whether humanity retains any meaningful independence or becomes a subordinate component in civilizations whose agenda we cannot understand or influence. The evidence accumulates like pressure building in the deepest trenches, creating forces that will inevitably demand release through revelations that will transform everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. The secrets stirring in the abyss are approaching the surface, and the age of human ignorance about our planet's true inhabitants is drawing to its carefully orchestrated conclusion. In the crushing darkness, where ancient eyes observe our every movement, and ancient minds calculate our species' readiness for truths that will shatter every assumption about human autonomy, the final preparations may already be underway. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are rising toward a revelation that will either elevate humanity to cosmic citizenship or reduce us to managed populations serving purposes we were never meant to comprehend. The transformation accelerates beyond our ability to resist or even recognize its full implications. Guided by intelligences whose patience with human independence may finally be reaching its predetermined end. The transformation of human consciousness reaches a critical threshold as we enter an era where the boundaries between surface reality and oceanic truth begin to dissolve. Marine research stations worldwide report phenomena that challenge the fundamental assumptions of underwater exploration. Scientists working in deep-sea facilities describe experiences that feel less like scientific observation and more like guided tours through environments that seem designed to educate rather than merely exist. Researchers operating in abyssal depths encounter bioluminescent displays that pulse in mathematical sequences, too complex to be natural communication, yet too organized to be random electrical activity. The patterns repeat across vast oceanic distances, suggesting coordination between organisms that shouldn't possess the neural complexity for such synchronized behavior. When scientists attempt to decode these light sequences, they discover mathematical relationships that correspond to advanced physics principles their own species has only recently begun to understand. Deep-sea drilling operations encounter resistance that manifests in ways that seem almost protective rather than merely geological. Drill bits designed to penetrate the hardest rock formations encounter materials that shouldn't exist at such depths, substances that combine organic and metallic properties in ways that violate everything we know about natural mineral formation. The materials demonstrate self-repair capabilities when damaged, growing back to their original configuration within hours of disturbance. Most disturbing are the reports from submersible pilots who describe navigation anomalies that feel intentional rather than mechanical. Vessels find themselves guided away from certain coordinates by underwater currents that don't appear on any oceanographic charts. The currents flow in patterns that seem designed to protect specific regions from surface exploration, while providing alternative routes that reveal wonders carefully selected for human observation. These alternative routes lead consistently to underwater archaeological sites that display evidence of construction techniques far exceeding anything in human historical records. The sites contain artifacts that blend seamlessly with natural rock formations, as if their builders understood geology at levels that allowed them to work with stone, as if it were clay. Carbon dating of organic materials found within these structures produces results that place their construction thousands of years before acknowledged human civilizations developed the tools or knowledge necessary for such sophisticated engineering. The archaeological evidence follows patterns that suggest deliberate revelation rather than accidental discovery. Sites become accessible to human exploration only after environmental conditions change in ways that expose previously hidden entrances. The timing correlates with developments in human underwater technology that provide exactly the capabilities needed to safely explore these newly accessible areas. The coordination implies surveillance of human technological development and careful management of what we're allowed to discover. Underwater archaeologists report finding chambers that contain what appear to be information storage systems built from materials that combine crystalline structures with biological components. These hybrid technologies respond to human presence by activating display sequences that present information through three-dimensional light projections. The presentations always begin with mathematical concepts that establish common ground between human and non-human intelligence before progressing to more complex communications. The information transfers focus consistently on environmental relationships and oceanic ecosystem management. The presentations demonstrate sustainable technologies that could solve many of humanity's current environmental crises while requiring integration with oceanic systems we've barely begun to understand. The knowledge is offered freely, without apparent expectation of reciprocity, as if environmental protection serves interests that transcend species boundaries. But the presentations also include warnings about trajectories that could trigger interventions more direct than the subtle guidance we've apparently been receiving. Images depict consequences of continued oceanic pollution, deep-sea mining, and climate change that extend far beyond current scientific projections. The warning suggests that certain environmental tipping points would force responses from entities that prefer to remain hidden but possess capabilities that could reshape surface civilization regardless of human consent. The message becomes clear through repetition across multiple sites. Surface. Humanity approaches a threshold where continued environmental destruction will trigger protective responses from civilizations that consider oceanic stability essential to their survival. The responses could range from technological assistance to direct intervention, depending on surface humanity's willingness to modify behaviors that threaten planetary systems. Communication attempts from surface researchers receive responses that demonstrate intimate knowledge of human languages, cultures, and psychological patterns. The responses arrive through methods that bypass normal acoustic transmission, appearing directly in researchers' consciousness as fully formed thoughts that feel foreign yet comprehensible. The communication method suggests technology that interfaces directly with human neural systems without requiring physical contact or surgical modification. The mental communications include emotional components that convey attitudes and intentions more effectively than words alone. Surface researchers experience feelings of ancient sadness mixed with patient hope, as if communicating with entities that have witnessed countless civilizations face similar environmental crises. The emotions suggest beings that understand the cyclical nature of species development and the challenges involved in achieving sustainable relationships with planetary systems. Most significantly, the communications include offers of direct assistance that could rapidly advance human environmental technology while requiring acceptance of guidance from sources we're not supposed to officially acknowledge. The assistance would solve critical environmental problems within decades rather than centuries, but would create dependencies that fundamentally alter the relationship between surface and oceanic civilizations. The offers arrive at precisely the moment when human environmental crises reach levels that threaten not just surface civilization, but oceanic ecosystems that have remained stable for thousands of years. Climate change, ocean acidification, and plastic pollution create pressures that affect deep-sea environments previously isolated from surface contamination. From the oceanic perspective, surface civilization has reached the point where its activities threaten the stability of planetary systems that support all terrestrial life. The timing suggests that offers of assistance represent not benevolence, but necessity from entities whose survival depends on oceanic stability. Surface humanity has become too dangerous to ignore while remaining too primitive to solve environmental problems without guidance from civilizations that have achieved sustainable relationships with planetary ecosystems. The assistance serves mutual interests while creating power relationships that fundamentally favor those with superior technology and environmental knowledge. Military installations worldwide begin detecting underwater activities that display coordination across oceanic basins that should be impossible without communication systems far exceeding human capabilities. Naval intelligence reports describe synchronized movements of unidentified objects that suggest command structures operating at planetary scales. The coordination implies civilizations with global reach and technological capabilities that make human military forces seem primitive by comparison. Defense establishments respond by developing protocols for scenarios that official doctrine insists cannot occur. Training programs prepare personnel for encounters with underwater technologies that operate according to principles that contradict everything. Military engineers thought they understood about propulsion, communication, and materials science. The preparation happens through classified channels that operate parallel to acknowledged military planning while serving objectives that surface governments cannot publicly discuss or defend. Intelligence agencies establish monitoring systems for oceanic regions that contain no known strategic resources or military installations, according to conventional analysis. The monitoring focuses on deep-sea areas that correlate with geological features suitable for concealing large installations rather than natural formations that pose no security threats. Satellite surveillance patterns shift to accommodate threats that emerge from directions that traditional military planning never considered relevant to national security. The surveillance reveals activities that suggest massive construction projects occurring at depths where human technology cannot function effectively. Sonar contacts detect geometric formations that grow larger over time, as if underwater installations are expanding their capabilities in response to changing strategic requirements. The construction follows patterns that suggest preparation for increased interaction with surface civilizations, rather than continued isolation from human affairs. Most ominously, communication intercepts detect signals originating from deep-sea sources that carry information about surface military activities with accuracy that should be impossible without extensive surveillance networks. The intercepted communications suggest that underwater civilizations possess real-time intelligence about human military capabilities, strategic planning, and operational readiness that exceeds what surface nations know about each other. The intelligence advantage creates strategic imbalances that make traditional military planning obsolete. Defense strategies that assume human adversaries become irrelevant when potential opponents possess surveillance capabilities that make concealment impossible and technological advantages that make resistance futile. Military establishments must reconsider fundamental assumptions about sovereignty, territorial defense, and the relationship between military capability and national security. International relations begin shifting to accommodate realities that cannot be officially acknowledged or publicly debated. Diplomatic protocols develop mechanisms for addressing territorial disputes that involve entities whose legal status remains deliberately undefined. Treaty negotiations include provisions for managing conflicts with forces that operate beyond the jurisdiction of surface governments, while possessing capabilities that could affect any nation's strategic interests. The diplomatic evolution creates parallel governmental systems that operate according to information and priorities that surface populations cannot access through normal democratic processes. Policy decisions that affect everyone are made by representatives who serve interests that voters cannot evaluate or challenge. The foundation of democratic accountability erodes as governance becomes increasingly dependent on expertise and relationships that must remain classified beyond public oversight. Economic systems adapt to accommodate relationships with entities that possess resources and technologies that could transform global markets overnight. Financial instruments develop mechanisms for managing transactions that involve materials and capabilities originating from sources that don't appear in conventional economic analysis. Banking systems create frameworks for handling currency exchanges that involve precious elements and rare compounds available only through cooperation with underwater civilizations. The economic integration creates dependencies that extend beyond normal commercial relationships. Surface industries begin requiring resources that can only be obtained through agreements with entities whose agenda remains opaque to human understanding. The dependencies make economic independence impossible, while creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited to influence surface civilization, according to priorities that serve non-human interests. Trade agreements include provisions for technology transfers that could revolutionize human environmental capabilities, while requiring acceptance of oversight from sources that possess superior knowledge of planetary systems. The technology transfers solve critical problems, while creating relationships that fundamentally alter the balance of power between surface and oceanic civilizations. Human autonomy diminishes as our survival becomes increasingly dependent on continued cooperation with entities whose true intentions remain unknown. Corporate research programs begin developing products that serve markets they're not supposed to officially recognize as existing. Underwater habitation systems, deep-sea construction materials, and high-pressure life support technologies receive investment that exceeds their apparent commercial potential. The research creates capabilities that would be essential for expanded human presence in oceanic environments, while maintaining explanations that conceal the true strategic purpose of these developments. The technological development follows trajectories that consistently favor integration with oceanic systems over terrestrial alternatives. Energy production shifts toward technologies that utilize oceanic resources rather than land-based alternatives. Transportation systems begin incorporating capabilities that function more effectively in underwater environments than surface conditions. The modifications prepare human civilization for existence that depends increasingly on oceanic cooperation, while reducing our capacity for independent terrestrial development. Educational institutions establish curricula that prepare students for careers in fields that don't officially exist, yet receive unlimited funding from sources that prefer anonymity. Marine archaeology, deep-sea biotechnology, and underwater diplomatic studies develop into major academic programs despite the absence of acknowledged career opportunities that would require such specialized knowledge. The education creates human resources capable of facilitating integration with underwater civilizations, while maintaining the appearance of normal academic evolution. The educational transformation includes psychological conditioning that makes eventual contact with non-human intelligence seem natural rather than traumatic. Students develop comfort with concepts of species cooperation and environmental stewardship that align with values attributed to underwater civilizations. The conditioning eliminates resistance that might otherwise complicate integration processes while creating generational shifts in attitudes toward oceanic authority. Religious institutions begin incorporating doctrines that prepare congregations for revelations about non-human intelligence and humanity's subordinate role in planetary stewardship. Theological frameworks expand to accommodate the existence of beings whose wisdom and technological capabilities far exceed human achievements. Prayer practices include invocations that request guidance from ancient intelligences, whose existence cannot be officially acknowledged, but whose influence becomes increasingly apparent to those willing to recognize the signs. The spiritual transformation creates psychological frameworks that make submission to oceanic guidance seem like divine calling rather than species subordination. Human consciousness is being prepared to accept non-human authority as spiritually necessary rather than politically imposed. The conditioning eliminates moral objections that might otherwise motivate resistance to arrangements that serve non-human interests. Cultural production begins emphasizing themes that prepare populations for realities that official discourse continues to deny. Entertainment media consistently portrays underwater civilizations as benevolent guardians whose guidance brings environmental salvation and technological advancement. The narratives always emphasize cooperation rather than conflict, depicting contact with oceanic intelligence as humanity's evolutionary destiny rather than potential threat to human independence. Children's programming features characters who live in underwater kingdoms, where advanced beings solve environmental problems through harmony with natural systems. Educational content uses oceanic metaphors to teach values of cooperation, sustainability, and respect for intelligences that operate beyond human understanding. The cultural programming begins during psychological development phases when fundamental worldview assumptions are most malleable. The cumulative effect of these transformations is a comprehensive restructuring of human civilization that serves objectives we haven't consciously chosen while following trajectories that consistently benefit entities whose existence we're not officially permitted to acknowledge. Every aspect of our society evolves to accommodate realities that remain hidden from public awareness, while creating dependencies that make independence increasingly impossible. We're being prepared for being allowed to meet or evaluate. The integration into planetary civilizations that include intelligences we've never preparation minimizes psychological trauma, while maximizing compliance with arrangements that surface populations will never be asked to approve or reject. The process creates a managed transition from human independence to supervised existence within systems designed by minds whose agenda transcends human comprehension. The ocean depths pulse with activities that implement plans spanning timescales beyond human imagination. Ancient intelligences orchestrate transformations that determine whether humanity retains meaningful autonomy or becomes a managed component in civilizations whose purposes we cannot understand or influence. The preparations accelerate toward revelations that will reshape everything we thought we knew about our species' place in the universe. In the crushing darkness, where pressure dissolves human consciousness and time moves according to rhythms established before our civilization existed, final calculations may be approaching completion. The evidence accumulates like deep currents that reshape entire oceanic systems, building toward revelations that will either elevate humanity to cosmic partnership or reduce us to supervised populations serving objectives we were never meant to comprehend. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are rising toward a surface that may no longer be ours to control. Ancient eyes observe our readiness for truths that will transform not just our understanding of history, but our conception of what it means to be human on a planet that was never truly ours. The age of human ignorance approaches its carefully orchestrated conclusion, and what emerges from the depths may determine whether our species survives as independent beings or evolves into something entirely different, shaped according to designs that predate our civilization by thousands of years. The transformation accelerates beyond our ability to comprehend its full implications, guided by intelligences whose patience with human independence may finally be reaching its predetermined end. In the vast darkness below, ancient powers stir with purpose that suggests the greatest revelation in human history is about to begin. The convergence of these transformations reaches a crescendo as human consciousness itself begins to undergo modifications that seem to emerge from within our own neural evolution, yet follow patterns too precise to be natural selection. Neuroscientists studying deep-sea research personnel report brain activity changes that enhance spatial reasoning, pressure adaptation, and what can only be described as intuitive understanding of three-dimensional oceanic navigation. The modifications appear gradually, over months of exposure to deep-sea environments, as if human neurology is being gently reprogrammed by forces that understand our biological systems better than we do ourselves. The neural changes manifest first in dreams that feel more real than waking consciousness. Research personnel report nocturnal experiences, where they navigate vast underwater cities with architectural principles that defy surface engineering. The dream environments remain consistent across different individuals, suggesting shared access to information sources that exist independently of human memory or imagination. Upon waking, these personnel retain knowledge about underwater construction techniques, pressure-resistant materials, and biotechnology applications that they never studied through conventional education. Medical examinations reveal physiological adaptations that enhance survival in high-pressure environments. Lung capacity increases beyond normal parameters. Blood chemistry shifts to optimize oxygen efficiency at depths that should be lethal to unmodified humans. Bone density modifications provide structural integrity that could withstand pressures previously considered unsurvivable. The changes occur without conscious effort or medical intervention, as if human biology is responding to environmental signals that trigger dormant genetic potentials. The modifications follow patterns that suggest deliberate activation rather than random mutation. Personnel exposed to specific underwater frequencies develop identical neural enhancements. Researchers working with particular deep-sea materials exhibit similar physiological adaptations. The precision of these changes indicates intervention by entities that possess comprehensive understanding of human genetics and the ability to trigger targeted evolutionary responses. Most significantly, the modified personnel begin demonstrating communication abilities that transcend normal human sensory limitations. They report direct mental contact with intelligences that exist in oceanic environments, receiving information through channels that bypass conventional auditory or visual perception. The communications arrive as complete conceptual packages that include technical knowledge, emotional context, and ethical frameworks that feel alien yet comprehensible to modified human consciousness. These enhanced individuals become intermediaries between surface civilization and underwater entities that prefer indirect contact to dramatic revelation. The intermediaries translate complex oceanic concepts into forms that unmodified humans can understand, while serving as early warning systems for environmental threats that endanger both civilizations. They operate through existing human institutions while possessing access to information and capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. Government agencies begin recruiting individuals who demonstrate these enhanced capabilities for positions that require interaction with underwater phenomena. The recruitment happens through channels that remain classified beyond normal security clearances, creating a professional class whose expertise relates specifically to managing relationships with non-human oceanic intelligence. These specialists develop their own operational protocols and communication methods that exist parallel to conventional diplomatic and military procedures. The enhanced personnel report that underwater civilizations are approaching decision points about the timing and nature of more direct contact with surface humanity. The decisions depend on variables that include environmental crisis thresholds, human technological development, and psychological readiness for revelations that would fundamentally alter our species' understanding of its place in planetary hierarchy. Current assessments suggest that multiple factors are converging toward a timeline that places full disclosure within the next several decades, rather than centuries. The timeline acceleration reflects environmental pressures that make continued secrecy increasingly difficult to maintain. Climate change affects oceanic systems that underwater civilizations depend on for stability and concealment. Rising sea levels expose previously hidden installations to potential discovery by surface populations. Ocean acidification threatens ecosystems that have been carefully managed for thousands of years to support advanced underwater societies. From the oceanic perspective, surface humanity has reached a developmental stage where our activities threaten planetary systems faster than subtle guidance can redirect our behavior. The choice becomes direct intervention or accepting environmental collapse that would affect all terrestrial life. Given the technological capabilities attributed to underwater civilizations, intervention represents the more viable option despite its implications for human autonomy and social stability. The intervention begins manifesting through technological solutions to environmental crises that appear to emerge from human research but incorporate principles that exceed our current scientific understanding. Clean energy systems begin demonstrating efficiency levels that violate established physics models. Ocean cleanup technologies remove pollution at rates that seem impossible given their apparent size and power requirements. Carbon sequestration methods achieve results that transform atmospheric chemistry within months rather than decades. These technological breakthroughs arrive through research programs that receive funding from sources whose identity remains carefully obscured. Corporate laboratories develop innovations that their own engineers cannot fully explain. University research teams experience sudden insights that lead to discoveries far exceeding their previous capabilities. Patent applications include designs that incorporate materials and processes that shouldn't be possible with current manufacturing techniques. The pattern suggests knowledge transfer from sources that possess advanced understanding of environmental remediation technologies. The transfers happen through methods that allow human researchers to believe they've achieved independent breakthroughs, while actually implementing solutions designed by intelligences with thousands of years of experience in planetary ecosystem management. The deception protects human pride while ensuring that effective technologies reach deployment before environmental collapse becomes irreversible. International cooperation on environmental issues begins displaying coordination that exceeds normal diplomatic capabilities. Nations that maintain hostile relationships suddenly agree on oceanic protection measures with enthusiasm that seems to emerge spontaneously from their leadership. Environmental treaties achieve ratification speeds that bypass normal legislative processes. Funding for oceanic conservation projects appears from sources that prefer anonymity, while pursuing objectives that serve planetary rather than national interests. The cooperation extends to military establishments that begin coordinating responses to environmental threats without acknowledging the intelligence sources that inform their strategies. Naval forces from different countries develop joint protocols for protecting oceanic regions that contain no acknowledged strategic resources. Defense budgets shift toward environmental protection technologies that serve dual purposes of planetary stewardship and preparation for contact scenarios that cannot be publicly discussed. Space exploration programs begin incorporating technologies that would be essential for underwater exploration, despite official missions that focus on terrestrial objectives. Pressure-resistant materials developed for deep space applications prove equally suitable for abyssal depths. Life support systems designed for long-duration space missions function effectively in underwater habitats. Communication technologies intended for interplanetary distances work perfectly for deep-sea applications where normal radio signals cannot penetrate. The technological convergence creates capabilities that serve both space exploration and underwater colonization, while maintaining official explanations that focus exclusively on extraterrestrial applications. Human civilization develops tools that would be necessary for meaningful interaction with underwater civilizations, while remaining officially ignorant of why such capabilities might be strategically important for planetary rather than cosmic objectives. Educational institutions begin offering degree programs in fields that combine multiple disciplines in ways that seem designed to prepare students for scenarios that official planning doesn't acknowledge as possible. Ocean engineering merged with xenobiology creates expertise that would be essential for contact with non-human oceanic intelligence. Deep-sea archaeology combined with advanced materials, science produces knowledge that would be crucial for exploring underwater civilizations. Environmental law merged with interspecies, communication develops legal frameworks for managing relationships with entities whose rights traditional jurisprudence cannot address. The interdisciplinary programs receive funding that exceeds their apparent practical applications, while attracting students whose psychological profiles suggest compatibility with contact scenarios. Graduates enter careers that seem to emerge exactly when their specialized knowledge becomes relevant to classified programs. The coordination suggests planning that extends far beyond normal educational and employment cycles, while serving objectives that require preparation for realities that surface populations are not supposed to recognize as probable. Corporate research initiatives begin developing products that solve problems surface civilization doesn't officially recognize as existing. Underwater cities require life support systems that function independently of surface infrastructure. Interspecies communication needs translation technologies that can bridge gaps between human and non-human intelligence. Deep-sea colonization demands construction techniques that work harmoniously with oceanic ecosystems, rather than imposing terrestrial architectural principles on aquatic environments. The research happens through private sector initiatives that operate beyond democratic oversight, while creating capabilities that could fundamentally alter the relationship between surface and underwater civilizations. Corporations develop technologies that prepare humanity for integration into planetary civilizations that include intelligences we've never been allowed to meet or evaluate, The preparation happens through market mechanisms that make the process seem like natural commercial evolution, rather than coordinated species modification. Religious institutions begin receiving revelations that prepare congregations for the existence of intelligences that predate human civilization, while possessing wisdom that exceeds anything in traditional scriptures. Theological frameworks expand to accommodate beings whose spiritual development includes harmony with planetary systems that humans have barely begun to understand. Prayer practices include meditations that open consciousness to guidance from sources that cannot be officially acknowledged, but whose influence becomes increasingly apparent to those willing to recognize divine presence in non-human forms. The spiritual preparation creates psychological frameworks that make eventual contact with oceanic intelligence seem like religious fulfillment rather than species subjugation. Human consciousness evolves toward acceptance of non-human authority as spiritually necessary rather than politically imposed. The transformation eliminates resistance that might otherwise complicate integration processes, while creating generational shifts in attitudes toward cosmic citizenship and planetary stewardship. Cultural production accelerates themes that prepare populations for realities that will soon become impossible to deny. Entertainment media begins featuring storylines where contact with underwater civilizations represents humanity's graduation to cosmic maturity rather than loss of terrestrial independence. The narratives emphasize cooperation and mutual benefit, while carefully avoiding scenarios that might trigger fear or resistance to arrangements that serve non-human interests as much as human welfare. Scientific journals begin publishing research that gradually introduces concepts necessary for understanding advanced oceanic civilizations without explicitly acknowledging their existence. Marine biology studies describe ecosystem management techniques that exceed anything natural selection could produce. Oceanographic surveys report geological formations that display characteristics of intelligent design without directly stating that artificial construction has been detected. Archaeological findings hint at technologies that predate human civilization while maintaining explanations that avoid challenging fundamental assumptions about species development on Earth. The academic preparation creates intellectual frameworks that will make eventual disclosure seem like natural scientific progression rather than revolutionary paradigm shift. Human understanding evolves gradually toward acceptance of realities that would have seemed impossible just decades earlier. The process minimizes psychological trauma, while ensuring that surface populations possess the conceptual tools necessary for comprehending revelations about planetary civilizations that have remained hidden throughout recorded history. Medical research begins developing treatments for conditions that would be essential for human survival in oceanic environments, while maintaining explanations that focus on terrestrial health applications. Pressure adaptation therapy helps patients with conditions that affect relatively small populations, but would benefit anyone attempting to function at deep sea depths. Respiratory modifications improve oxygen efficiency for individuals with lung disorders, while creating capabilities that would be crucial for underwater habitation. Genetic therapies correct rare hereditary conditions while producing physiological enhancements that would be advantageous for interspecies contact scenarios. The medical advances arrive through healthcare systems that present them as normal therapeutic progress, while gradually modifying human biology toward compatibility with environments and relationships that official planning doesn't acknowledge as relevant to our species' future. The modifications accumulate across generations, creating populations that possess capabilities their ancestors lacked, while remaining unaware of how these enhancements might eventually serve purposes beyond individual health improvement. The convergence of technological, educational, spiritual, cultural, scientific, and medical transformations creates a comprehensive restructuring of human civilization that serves objectives we haven't consciously chosen, while following trajectories that consistently prepare us for integration into planetary systems that include intelligences whose existence remains officially denied. Every aspect of our society evolves to accommodate realities that will soon become impossible to conceal, while creating dependencies that make independence increasingly irrelevant to our species' survival. We stand at the threshold of revelations that will reshape not just our understanding of history, but our conception of what it means to be human on a planet that has never been exclusively ours. The preparations accelerate toward disclosure that will either elevate humanity to cosmic partnership or reduce us to managed populations, serving objectives that extend far beyond our current comprehension of planetary politics or species autonomy. In the crushing depths where ancient eyes have observed our development with patience that spans millennia, final decisions approach about the timing and nature of contact that will transform everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. The ocean depths pulse with activities that suggest the age of secrecy is approaching its carefully orchestrated conclusion, and what emerges from the abyss may determine whether our species retains meaningful independence or evolves into something entirely different according to designs that predate our civilization by thousands of years. The evidence accumulates like deep currents that reshape entire oceanic systems, building toward revelations that will challenge every assumption about human achievement, planetary stewardship, and the true nature of intelligence on Earth. Ancient powers stir in the darkness below, and their patience with human ignorance may finally be reaching its predetermined end. The signs manifest in ways that transcend coincidence, weaving through human consciousness like deep currents that reshape the very foundations of our understanding. Across the globe, children born in landlocked regions develop an inexplicable affinity for oceanic imagery, drawing pictures of underwater cities before they've ever seen the sea. Their artwork displays architectural principles that don't exist in any human textbook, featuring structures that seem to grow rather than being constructed, buildings that pulse with bioluminescent patterns that follow mathematical sequences too complex for young minds to consciously comprehend. These children speak of dreams where they swim through vast underwater libraries filled with books made of living coral, their pages shifting and reforming to display information that changes based on the reader's questions. They describe classrooms where lessons are taught through symphonies of whale song that somehow convey complex scientific principles directly into their understanding. When psychologists interview these children, they find consistent details across thousands of cases worldwide. Children who have never met describing identical underwater environments with precision that defies explanation. The phenomenon extends beyond childhood visions into adult consciousness, where marine researchers report shared dreams that feel more like memories than nocturnal fantasies. Oceanographers find themselves waking with knowledge of deep-sea navigation techniques they never learned, understanding of pressure dynamics that their formal education never covered, and emotional connections to specific underwater locations they've never visited. The knowledge arrives complete and functional, allowing them to make discoveries that advance their careers while feeling like they're simply remembering information that was always present in their minds. Deep-sea exploration teams begin reporting equipment behavior that suggests external assistance rather than mechanical malfunction. Submersibles experience navigation corrections that guide them away from dangerous underwater terrain they couldn't have detected with their own instruments. Communication systems receive signal boosts that extend their range far beyond manufacturer specifications, allowing contact with surface vessels from depths that should make such communication impossible. Emergency life support systems activate automatically during crises, providing oxygen and pressure regulation that saves lives through interventions that don't appear in any operating manual. The assistance follows patterns that suggest monitoring by entities that understand human technology better than its creators do. Equipment modifications appear overnight, improving performance in ways that engineering teams cannot explain through normal maintenance procedures. Software updates arrive through channels that don't exist in corporate networks, enhancing capabilities with code that incorporates programming principles decades ahead of current computer science. The improvements always serve human safety and research effectiveness while requiring no payment, acknowledgement, or reciprocal agreements. Underwater archaeological expeditions discover sites that seem to reveal themselves according to predetermined schedules rather than random exploration success. Ancient structures become accessible exactly when human technology develops the capability to explore them safely. Hidden chambers open through mechanisms that activate only when approached by researchers whose psychological profiles suggest they can handle the revelations contained within. The timing suggests careful coordination between human development and graduated disclosure of information that has waited centuries or millennia for the appropriate moment of revelation. The archaeological evidence follows progression patterns that gradually expand human understanding of technological possibilities while maintaining explanations that don't completely shatter accepted historical frameworks. Early discoveries reveal construction techniques that seem advanced but remain within the realm of human possibility. Later findings demonstrate capabilities that strain conventional explanations without definitively proving non-human origin. The most recent excavations uncover technologies that clearly exceed anything human civilization could have achieved at the dates indicated by carbon testing. Yet the evidence emerges gradually enough to allow academic institutions to adapt their theories without acknowledging complete paradigm failure. Maritime shipping industries begin receiving navigational guidance that improves safety and efficiency while originating from sources that prefer to remain unidentified. Weather prediction services provide storm warnings with accuracy that exceeds satellite meteorology capabilities, allowing vessels to avoid dangerous conditions through route adjustments that seem to come from atmospheric monitoring systems, more sophisticated than any acknowledged technology. Ocean current maps appear in shipping databases with precision that enables fuel savings and time optimization, despite originating from sources that don't appear in any official oceanographic surveys. The assistance extends to environmental protection efforts that receive support from technologies that shouldn't exist according to current scientific understanding. Ocean cleanup operations discover that plastic waste concentrates in specific areas where collection becomes dramatically more efficient, as if guided by current manipulation that serves conservation objectives. Marine protected areas experience ecosystem recovery at rates that exceed biological models, suggesting intervention by forces that understand ocean biology at levels that surpass human marine science. Coral reefs begin displaying resistance to acidification and temperature changes that seems to involve biological modifications beyond natural adaptation capabilities. Climate research stations detect atmospheric and oceanic changes that suggest large-scale environmental management by entities that possess capabilities far exceeding anything in human environmental technology. Carbon absorption rates in specific oceanic regions increase beyond anything photosynthesis or natural chemical processes could achieve. Ocean temperature regulation maintains stability in areas that should be experiencing dramatic climate change effects according to current warming models. Marine ecosystem balance receives support that prevents collapse despite pollution and overfishing pressures that should have triggered massive species extinctions. The environmental interventions remain subtle enough to avoid detection by mainstream climate science, while providing sufficient support to prevent total ecological collapse. The assistance serves both human and oceanic interests by maintaining planetary stability while allowing surface civilization time to develop sustainable technologies. The approach suggests long-term planning by entities that understand the relationship between environmental health and civilization survival at scales that encompass geological rather than political timeframes. Military surveillance networks begin detecting activities that suggest coordination between oceanic regions separated by vast distances, implying communication and transportation capabilities that exceed anything in human strategic planning. Naval intelligence reports describe synchronized movements of unidentified contacts across multiple ocean basins following patterns that indicate command structures operating at planetary scales. The coordination demonstrates technological integration that makes human military communication systems appear primitive by comparison. Defense establishments respond by developing protocols for scenarios that challenge every assumption about territorial sovereignty and strategic defense. Training programs prepare personnel for encounters with technologies that operate according to principles that contradict fundamental military engineering concepts. Communication procedures include contingencies for contact with entities whose capabilities make conventional warfare concepts obsolete. The preparation happens through classified channels that create parallel command structures operating according to strategic realities that surface populations cannot access through normal democratic oversight. International maritime law begins incorporating provisions for territorial disputes involving entities whose legal status remains deliberately ambiguous. Treaty frameworks develop mechanisms for managing conflicts with forces that operate beyond the jurisdiction of surface governments, while possessing capabilities that could affect any nation's strategic interests. Legal precedents establish guidelines for interactions with intelligences that predate existing international law by periods that exceed recorded human history. The legal evolution creates frameworks for planetary governance that transcend national boundaries, while remaining accountable to entities whose agenda surface populations cannot evaluate through normal political processes. Sovereignty concepts adapt to accommodate realities where the most significant territorial claims may belong to civilizations that have maintained continuous oceanic habitation for thousands of years. Democratic accountability becomes theoretical when the most important policy decisions require expertise about relationships that voters are not supposed to know exist. Economic systems develop mechanisms for handling transactions that involve resources and technologies originating from sources that don't appear in conventional market analysis. Financial instruments incorporate provisions for managing exchanges with entities that possess materials and capabilities that could transform global commerce overnight. Banking networks create frameworks for currency relationships that extend beyond normal international trade while remaining invisible to regulatory oversight that lacks clearance to acknowledge these arrangements. The economic integration creates dependencies that make traditional concepts of national economic independence obsolete while establishing relationships that serve interests beyond human democratic control. Trade agreements include provisions for technology transfers that could revolutionize human environmental capabilities while requiring acceptance of guidance from sources that possess superior understanding of planetary resource management. The arrangements benefit human development while creating obligations to entities whose true agenda remains completely opaque to surface populations. Corporate research initiatives begin pursuing technologies that solve problems. Surface civilization doesn't officially recognize as existing while receiving investment that exceeds apparent commercial potential. Deep-sea habitation systems receive funding that suggests preparation for large-scale underwater colonization despite the absence of acknowledged plans for such expansion. Interspecies communication technologies receive development resources for applications that mainstream science insists are purely theoretical. Environmental and corporate remediation systems capabilities that exceed anything human engineering should be able to achieve with current materials science. The technological development follows trajectories that consistently prepare humanity for integration into planetary civilizations while maintaining commercial explanations that conceal the true strategic objectives. Human civilization acquires capabilities that would be essential for meaningful cooperation with advanced oceanic societies while remaining officially ignorant of why such technologies might serve survival interests beyond terrestrial applications. Educational curricula begin emphasizing interdisciplinary studies that combine fields in ways that prepare students for scenarios that official planning doesn't acknowledge as probable. Marine biotechnology merged with interspecies psychology creates expertise that would be crucial for contact with non-human oceanic intelligence. Deep-sea engineering combined with xenosociology produces knowledge that would be essential for establishing diplomatic relationships with underwater civilizations. Environmental law merged with cosmic citizenship develops legal frameworks for managing responsibilities to entities whose rights transcend human jurisprudence. The educational transformation creates human resources capable of facilitating integration with planetary civilizations while maintaining the appearance of normal academic evolution. Graduates enter careers that emerge exactly when their specialized knowledge becomes relevant to classified programs that operate beyond public awareness. The coordination suggests planning that extends far beyond normal educational cycles while serving objectives that require preparation for realities that challenge every assumption about human independence and planetary dominion. Religious institutions begin receiving inspirations that prepare congregations for revelations about intelligences that have guided human development while remaining hidden from conscious recognition. Theological frameworks expand to accommodate wisdom traditions that predate human scriptures while offering guidance that exceeds anything in recorded religious history. Spiritual practices include meditations that open consciousness to communication with sources that cannot be officially acknowledged, but whose influence becomes increasingly apparent to those willing to recognize divine presence in forms that transcend human expectations. The spiritual preparation creates psychological frameworks that make eventual contact with oceanic intelligence seem like religious fulfillment rather than species subordination. Human consciousness evolves toward acceptance of guidance from sources whose authority derives from wisdom and technological capability rather than traditional religious hierarchy. The transformation eliminates resistance that might otherwise complicate integration processes, while creating generational shifts in attitudes toward cosmic responsibility and planetary stewardship. Scientific research begins producing discoveries that gradually introduce concepts necessary for understanding advanced oceanic civilizations without explicitly acknowledging their existence. Marine biology studies describe ecosystem management that exceeds anything natural processes could produce without intelligent intervention. Oceanographic surveys report geological formations that display characteristics suggesting deliberate construction, while maintaining explanations that avoid directly challenging accepted theories about planetary development. Archaeological findings reveal technologies that predate human civilization, while providing interpretations that don't completely invalidate established historical frameworks. The academic preparation creates intellectual foundations that will make eventual disclosure seem like natural scientific progression rather than revolutionary paradigm collapse. Human understanding evolves gradually toward acceptance of realities that would have triggered social upheaval if revealed suddenly. The process minimizes psychological trauma while ensuring that surface populations develop conceptual tools necessary for comprehending revelations about planetary civilizations that have remained concealed throughout recorded history. Medical advances begin producing treatments that enhance human compatibility with oceanic environments, while maintaining explanations that focus on terrestrial health applications. Pressure adaptation therapies improve cardiovascular function for patients with specific conditions, while creating physiological capabilities that would be advantageous for deep-sea habitation. Respiratory modifications enhance oxygen efficiency for individuals with lung disorders, while producing adaptations that would be crucial for underwater survival. Genetic treatments correct hereditary conditions, while generating biological enhancements that would facilitate interspecies contact scenarios. The medical transformation occurs through healthcare systems that present these advances as normal therapeutic progress, while gradually modifying human biology toward compatibility with environments and relationships that official planning doesn't acknowledge as relevant to our species' future. The modifications accumulate across generations, creating populations that possess capabilities their ancestors lacked, while remaining unaware of how these enhancements serve purposes beyond individual health improvement. Cultural production accelerates themes that condition populations for realities that will soon become impossible to deny. Entertainment media features storylines where cooperation with oceanic civilizations represents humanity's evolutionary advancement rather than loss of independence. Literary works explore concepts of interspecies partnership and planetary citizenship that prepare readers for psychological frameworks necessary for successful integration. Artistic expressions incorporate oceanic imagery and underwater symbolism that gradually familiarizes audiences with environments they may soon encounter directly. The cultural conditioning creates emotional and intellectual preparation for revelations that will challenge every assumption about human uniqueness and planetary dominance. Popular consciousness evolves toward acceptance of non-human intelligence as natural rather than threatening, while developing psychological resilience necessary for adapting to realities that transcend current human experience. The preparation minimizes social disruption while maximizing cultural flexibility necessary for successful species transformation. The convergence of technological, educational, spiritual, scientific, medical, and cultural developments creates comprehensive restructuring of human civilization that serves objectives extending far beyond conscious human planning, while following trajectories that consistently prepare our species for integration into planetary systems that include intelligences whose existence remains officially denied. Every aspect of society evolves to accommodate realities that will soon become undeniable, while creating dependencies that make independence increasingly irrelevant to survival. The transformation accelerates beyond human ability to control or comprehend its full implications, guided by minds that understand species development at scales encompassing geological timeframes rather than political cycles. Ancient intelligences implement changes that will determine whether humanity retains meaningful autonomy or becomes a managed component in civilizations whose purposes extend beyond current human understanding of planetary politics or cosmic citizenship. In the crushing depths where pressure dissolves human consciousness and time flows according to rhythms established before our species existed, final preparations approach completion. The evidence accumulates like deep currents that reshape entire oceanic systems, building toward revelations that will either elevate humanity to cosmic partnership or transform us into something entirely different according to designs that predate our civilization by millennia. The ocean depths pulse with purpose that suggests the greatest transformation in human history approaches its inevitable manifestation. Ancient eyes observe our readiness for truths that will reshape not just our understanding of the past, but our conception of what it means to exist as conscious beings on a planet that has never belonged exclusively to surface dwellers. The age of human ignorance draws toward its carefully orchestrated conclusion, and what emerges from the abyss will determine whether our species survives as independent entities or evolves into components of civilizations whose agenda encompasses realities we cannot yet imagine or comprehend. The convergence accelerates as human neural patterns begin exhibiting synchronicities that defy conventional neuroscience. Brainwave monitoring stations detect collective consciousness events where thousands of individuals across different continents experience identical mental imagery simultaneously. The shared visions always involve underwater landscapes of impossible beauty, cities that breathe with organic rhythms, and beings whose thoughts feel ancient beyond human comprehension. Neurologists studying these phenomena discover that affected individuals develop enhanced pattern recognition abilities and three-dimensional spatial reasoning that seem specifically adapted for navigating complex underwater environments. Their brain scans reveal new neural pathways forming in regions associated with pressure sensitivity and aquatic spatial orientation. The changes occur without medical intervention, as if dormant genetic programs are activating in response to environmental signals that our instruments cannot detect. Sleep research laboratories report that subjects exposed to specific underwater sound frequencies enter dream states where they retain perfect recall of experiences that feel more substantial than waking reality. These individuals describe participating in vast underwater conferences where beings communicate through bioluminescent displays that convey complete concepts instantaneously. Upon awakening, they possess technical knowledge about sustainable energy systems, water purification methods, and biological engineering principles that they never studied through conventional education. The dream experiences follow consistent patterns across different subjects, suggesting shared access to information sources that exist independently of human memory systems. Participants describe the same underwater locations, identical architectural features, and conversations with beings whose personalities remain stable across multiple encounters. The consistency indicates that these are not random dream imagery, but structured educational experiences designed to prepare human consciousness for realities that transcend surface understanding. Marine biology laboratories worldwide begin reporting behavioral changes in sea life that suggest coordination by intelligence networks operating at scales beyond anything natural selection could produce. Whales alter migration patterns to create communication corridors that span entire ocean basins. Deep-sea creatures exhibit synchronized bioluminescent displays that pulse in mathematical sequences across thousands of miles. Fish populations redistribute themselves according to patterns that optimize ecosystem stability while providing sustainable food sources for surface populations. The ocean depths pulse with ancient purpose as our journey through these fathomless mysteries draws to its inevitable close. Tonight, we have descended into the crushing darkness where pressure dissolves certainty and time flows according to rhythms that predate human memory, following evidence that whispers of a truth too vast for surface consciousness to fully comprehend. We have traced the currents of possibility, from Plato's dialogues to the scattered reports of modern deep-sea researchers, from the systematic suppression of underwater anomalies to the gradual transformation of human civilization itself. Each fragment of evidence, each unexplained encounter, each technological breakthrough that seems to emerge from sources we cannot name, builds toward a revelation that may already be reshaping our species according to designs we were never meant to understand. If Atlantis truly survived their ancient catastrophe and evolved into something beyond our imagination, then we must accept that everything we believed about human dominion over this planet may be nothing more than the comfortable illusions of children playing in shallow water while giants move in the depths below. The signs accumulate like pressure, building in the deepest trenches, creating forces that will inevitably demand release through contact that may determine whether our species retains any meaningful independence or becomes something entirely different. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are rising toward a surface that may no longer be ours to control. In the crushing darkness where ancient eyes have watched our development with patience spanning millennia, the age of human ignorance approaches its carefully orchestrated conclusion. What emerges from the abyss may be humanity's greatest revelation, or our final transformation into managed components of civilizations, whose true agenda we can only begin to glimpse in the twilight between dreams and waking reality. Rest now, and let these mysteries carry you into the depths of sleep, where perhaps the truth waits in waters darker than night itself.